family as the deepest practice of loving kindness sometimes. The person who hurts your heart the most is not your enemy, but someone you love deeply. The most difficult people to love are often not strangers, but the ones sitting across from us at the dinner table. They are the people whose footsteps we recognize in the hallway, whose voices we have heard for years, whose moods can change the atmosphere of an entire room. This narration follows the quiet inner journey of ordinary family members, parents, children, spouses, siblings, who discover that the home is not merely a place of comfort, but a living meditation hall where patience, mindfulness, compassion, and self-reliance are tested every day. In this home, love exists, but it does not always speak gently. Care is present, but it sometimes appears as control, criticism, silence, worry, or tiredness. And beneath every difficult word, every wounded reaction, every small misunderstanding, there is a human being longing to be seen, understood, and loved. Family is where many of us first learn what love feels like, but family is also where we first learn what pain feels like. A mother's sigh can stay in the heart longer than the insult of a stranger. A father's disappointment can echo louder than the judgment of the world. A child's cold reply can wound a parent more deeply than any failure outside the home. A spouse's silence, a sibling's comparison, an elder's complaint. These small moments may look ordinary from the outside, but inside the heart, they can feel heavy, intimate, and old. Because family does not touch only the surface of us. Family touches our history. It touches the places where we still want approval, where we still fear rejection, where we still hope someone will finally understand what we have carried in silence. A stranger may criticize us, and we can walk away, but when someone close to us speaks with irritation, neglects our feelings, or fails to notice our effort, the wound lands somewhere deeper. It lands in the part of us that says, "You should know me, you should care, you should understand." This is why the people closest to us are not always the easiest to love. Not because love is absent, but because expectation is present. Not because the bond is weak, but because the bond is strong enough to awaken all the unfinished places in the heart. We expect family to be safe, gentle, accepting, loyal, and when they are not, the disappointment feels personal. It feels like a betrayal of something sacred. But from the perspective of Buddhist practice, this very difficulty is not separate from the path. It may be the path. It is easy to speak of loving kindness when no one is challenging us. It is easy to feel peaceful sitting alone in a quiet room, with soft light, still air, and no one asking anything from us. It is easy to imagine ourselves compassionate when no one has touched our pride, our fear, our exhaustion, or our need to be right. In solitude, the mind can appear calm. In silence, we may believe we have no anger. In distance, we may think we have forgiven. But then we return home. Someone leaves a cup unwashed in the sink. Someone speaks in a tone that feels disrespectful. Someone asks the same question again. Someone complains at the wrong time. Someone misunderstands our intention. Someone does not say thank you. Someone gives advice when we only wanted comfort. And suddenly, the peaceful image we held of ourselves begins to shake. This is not failure. This is revelation. The home shows us what the meditation cushion alone may not reveal. It shows us the speed of our irritation, the sharpness of our tongue, the secret desire to control, the habit of defending ourselves before we truly listen. It shows us how quickly love can become demand, how quickly care can become pressure, how quickly fear can disguise itself as anger. In this way, family life becomes a mirror, not always a gentle mirror, but a truthful one. Imagine a parent who has worked for years, carrying responsibilities no one fully sees. They cook, earn, plan, worry, sacrifice, and continue, often without asking for recognition. Yet inside, there is a quiet ache. Does anyone notice me? Does anyone appreciate what I have given? When the child speaks impatiently, the parent may not be reacting only to that one sentence. They may be reacting to years of tiredness, fear, and unseen effort. Their anger may be carrying a hidden request. Please see how much I love you. Please understand how hard I have tried. Now imagine the child sitting on the other side. The child hears advice as criticism, hears concern as control, hears protection as distrust. They may think, why can't they let me live? Why is my life never enough? Why does love feel like pressure? Beneath the child's resistance, there may also be a quiet ache. Please trust me. Please see me as my own person. Please love me without turning me into your fear. And then there is the elder in the house, perhaps speaking too much about the past, repeating stories, complaining about small things. To the younger ones, it may feel difficult, even exhausting, but inside that elder may be a fear of disappearing, a fear of becoming unnecessary, a fear that the family they once held together is moving on without them. Their complaints may not be only complaints. Sometimes they are a trembling way of saying, do I still matter here? Consider too what happens between brothers and sisters once a parent is gone. Two sisters grown with families of their own stand in the same childhood kitchen and cannot agree on what to do with their mother's house. One wants to sell it quickly, to close the chapter, to stop the ache of walking past a room that still smells faintly of her mother's tea. The other wants to keep it exactly as it is, untouched, because letting go of the house feels like letting go of the woman who lived in it. Neither sister is being selfish. Neither is wrong. They are simply grieving in different rhythms, and grief rarely asks permission before it turns into an argument about furniture or money, or who visited more often in the final years. Old scripts return uninvited. The responsible one, the favorite one, the forgotten one. A comment about a piece of jewelry becomes a referendum on who was loved best. And beneath every sharp word about a will or a keepsake, there is usually a much softer sentence trying to be heard. I am not ready to lose her. I am afraid of losing you too, now that she is no longer here to hold us together. When siblings can pause long enough to notice that the fight is rarely about the object in front of them, something can soften. Not always immediately. Sometimes it takes years, several holidays passed in silence, before someone finally says, I was not fighting about the house. I was fighting because I did not know how to say goodbye. Family practice does not end when the parent who once held everyone together is gone. In some ways, it only becomes more delicate, because now the siblings must learn to hold each other without the person who used to do that holding for them. In many households, people are not lacking love. They are lacking skill. They love each other, but they do not know how to express love without turning it into demand. They want closeness, but they protect themselves with pride. They want peace, but they speak from old wounds. They want to be heard, but they interrupt. They want to be understood, but they accuse. They want tenderness, but they have practiced harshness for so long that tenderness feels unfamiliar. So small words become heavy. A simple "you're late" can mean, I was worried. A cold "do whatever you want" can mean, I feel powerless. A sharp "you never listen" can mean, I am lonely in this relationship. A silent meal can be full of unspoken sentences, each person sitting with a private storm, each person waiting for someone else to soften first. And here is where practice begins. Loving kindness, or metta, is not merely a sweet feeling. It is not pretending that everything is fine. It is not allowing harmful behavior without boundaries. It is not forcing ourselves to smile while resentment grows inside. True loving kindness is a courageous training of the heart. It is the willingness to see another person as a being who suffers, even when their suffering comes out in difficult forms. It is the ability to pause before we strike back. It is the practice of remembering, this person too wants to be happy. This person too fears pain. This person too carries wounds I may not fully understand. This does not mean we excuse every action. It means we do not let our own heart become poisoned by hatred. We can be firm with compassion. We can say no without cruelty. We can protect our peace without closing our humanity. A good parent is not one who always pleases the child, but one who teaches the child how to live with mindfulness, compassion, and self-reliance. And this teaching is not only done through words, it is done through the way the parent breathes before responding, the way they admit mistakes, the way they set boundaries without humiliation, the way they show that love is not indulgence, and discipline is not punishment when guided by wisdom. A child, too, practices by learning that freedom does not mean rejecting every form of guidance. Self-reliance does not mean pride. Growing up does not mean becoming hard. To mature is to see our parents not only as parents, but as human beings, sometimes conditioned, sometimes clumsy in love. This seeing does not erase pain, but it can soften the hatred around the pain. It allows space for understanding, and spouses, siblings, relatives, all of them become fellow practitioners, even when they do not know it. Each person in the family becomes a bell of mindfulness. Not always a pleasant bell. Sometimes the bell rings through conflict, sometimes through disappointment, sometimes through the irritation of hearing the same habit again and again. But every time the bell rings, we are invited to return to ourselves. What is happening in my body right now? Is my chest tight? Is my jaw clenched? Am I about to speak from anger, fear, or love? What am I protecting? What story am I believing? Do I need to win this argument, or do I need to understand this moment? These questions are simple, but they are powerful. They turn the home into a meditation hall, without incense, without robes, without perfect silence. The kitchen becomes a place of practice. The dining table becomes a place of practice. The car ride, the doorway, the shared bathroom, the family message thread, all of it becomes practice. Every meal is a chance to notice gratitude or complaint. Every disagreement is a chance to notice pride or humility. Every impatient reply is a chance to begin again. Every moment of restraint is a small victory of awareness over habit. Many people believe spiritual practice must happen somewhere far away from daily life. A mountain temple, a silent retreat, a peaceful garden. And yes, those places can help us touch stillness. But if we can only be peaceful where no one disturbs us, then our peace is still fragile. If we can only be kind to people who agree with us, then our kindness is still selective. If we can only forgive from a distance, then our forgiveness has not yet entered the body of daily living. Family life asks for a deeper kind of practice because it gives us no perfect conditions. It asks us to practice when we are tired, when the house is noisy, when money is tight, when old patterns return, when someone speaks before thinking, when someone forgets again, when we ourselves become the difficult person. This may be the most humbling truth. In family, we are not only the ones who get hurt, we are also the ones who hurt others. We may remember every harsh word spoken to us, but forget the tone we used yesterday. We may long to be understood while refusing to understand. We may criticize another person's anger while justifying our own. Family practice begins when we stop asking only, "Why are they like this?" and begin to ask, "What is being awakened in me? What am I contributing to this suffering? What would love look like if it had wisdom?" This is not an easy question, but it is a liberating one, because the purpose of practice is not to create a perfect family. Perfect families do not exist. Every home has hidden griefs, old misunderstandings, different temperaments, unmet needs, and moments of failure. The purpose is to create a more awakened heart within the family we actually have. A heart that can see clearly, a heart that can choose a softer word, a heart that can apologize without collapsing, a heart that can forgive without losing discernment, a heart that can love without needing to control. Sometimes the deepest transformation in a family begins with one person who decides to pause, one person who does not answer anger with anger, one person who listens a little longer, one person who says, I understand you are upset. Instead of you always do this. One person who leaves the room to breathe, not to punish. One person who returns with more honesty and less blame. This does not change everything overnight, but it changes the direction of energy. It introduces mindfulness where there was automatic reaction. It introduces compassion where there was only defense. It introduces space where there was suffocation. And in that space, something tender may begin to breathe again. To practice loving kindness with family is to understand that love is not always comfortable. Sometimes love asks us to grow beyond our favorite identity. The victim, the controller, the one who is always right, the one who suffers silently, the one who never apologizes. Love asks us to become more conscious, more responsible for our inner world, more willing to see pain without immediately turning it into blame. And perhaps this is why family is such a profound field of practice, because there is nowhere to hide for long. Our patterns are seen, our patience is tested, our compassion is stretched, our self-reliance is strengthened. We learn that no one else can breathe for us, no one else can purify our anger for us, no one else can do the work of awakening our heart, even in the middle of family life. Each person must learn to stand inwardly, to return to mindfulness, to take responsibility for the seeds they water in themselves. The Buddha's path is not separate from the sound of a child crying, a parent worrying, a spouse misunderstanding, or an elder longing to be remembered. The path is right there, in the ordinary room, in the ordinary sentence, in the ordinary breath before we reply. The sacred does not always arrive with stillness. Sometimes it arrives as the exact person who tests our heart. So when family feels difficult, it may not mean you are failing at love. It may mean you are being invited into a deeper kind of love. A love with eyes open. A love that includes patience, boundaries, forgiveness, and truth. A love that does not depend on everyone being easy. A love that begins again. Not because the other person is perfect, but because the heart is learning freedom. To understand why family life can become such a powerful spiritual practice, we must first look honestly at why the people we love can trigger us so deeply. The reason family can stir us so quickly is that family is not just a group of people living under one roof. Family is where the heart first learned what safety feels like, what love costs, what silence can mean, and what it means to be chosen, ignored, praised, corrected, or disappointed. Long before we had the language to explain our feelings, we were already storing impressions inside us. A tone of voice, a look, a door closing too hard, a promise that was forgotten, a time we felt invisible. These things may seem small from the outside, but inside the body, they can become very alive. And because family touches the oldest parts of us, it also touches the most sensitive ones. This is why a simple comment from a parent can land like a heavy judgment. A child's quietness can suddenly feel like rejection. A spouse's tired face can seem like distance, even when it is only exhaustion. The event itself may be small, but the meaning we attach to it can be enormous. Often, the pain is not only in what was said, it is in what we believe it meant. We do not only hear words, we hear history. We hear old wounds speaking in the background. When your mother says, "Be careful," you may hear, "I do not trust you." When your father gives advice, you may hear, "You are not enough on your own." When your child turns away, you may hear, "I do not matter to you." When your partner is quiet, you may hear, "You have become unimportant." And suddenly, one ordinary moment is no longer just an ordinary moment. It is carrying the weight of many earlier moments that never fully healed. This is one of the deepest reasons family becomes such a powerful field for practice. Family reveals where we are still tender. It shows us where we want to be loved without conditions, where we want to be seen without having to explain ourselves, where we want respect without having to ask for it, where we want care without having to prove our worth. Beneath many arguments is a very human longing. Please understand me. Please choose me. Please do not make me feel small. And yet, because this longing is so tender, we often do not speak it directly. Instead, it comes out as irritation, defensiveness, withdrawal, sharpness, or resentment. The heart feels hurt, but the mouth says something else. The body feels fear, but the face becomes hard. We protect ourselves in the only ways we know how. Sometimes we shut down. Sometimes we become cold. Sometimes we become overly controlling, hoping that if everything is managed perfectly, we will not have to feel the ache underneath. Mindfulness begins right here, in this very human moment. It begins when we pause before believing every story the mind creates. Not every feeling is a fact. Not every thought is truth. Not every emotional wave should be obeyed immediately. There is often a moment between what happens and what we do with it. In that moment, if we are willing to be honest, we can ask a simple but powerful question. What is really happening inside me right now? Maybe what is happening is not only anger. Maybe beneath the anger is hurt. Maybe beneath the hurt is fear. Maybe beneath the fear is the old memory of not being enough. Maybe beneath the frustration is a deep wish to finally be appreciated, to finally be heard, to finally rest without having to defend your place in the family. When we look carefully, we begin to see that our reactions are rarely only about the present moment. They often carry years of unfinished emotion. This is why two people can live through the same conversation and feel completely different things. One person hears correction, another hears humiliation. One person hears concern, another hears control. One person hears a child's silence as peace. Another hears it as distance. The outer event may be the same, but the inner world is not. And that inner world has a history. Sometimes, the family conflict in front of us is only the top layer. Underneath it is the deeper layer, the old child inside who still wants to be loved easily, without conditions, without effort, without disappointment. That child may still be waiting for an apology that never came, still waiting for a tender word, still waiting to feel chosen, still waiting to know, I matter. And when a family member touches that tender place, the reaction can feel bigger than the moment itself, because in truth it is bigger. It belongs to many moments. This does not mean the pain is fake. It means the pain is layered. When we understand this, family conflict can become less about proving who is right and more about revealing what is still unresolved. The argument becomes a mirror. The irritation becomes a teacher. The silence becomes an invitation to look inward. We stop seeing every difficult interaction as evidence that love has failed, and we begin to see it as a doorway into healing. Not because the conflict is pleasant, but because it is honest. It shows us where the heart still tightens. It shows us where there is fear of abandonment, fear of disrespect, fear of not being enough, fear of being controlled, fear of being unseen. And once we see that clearly, something softens. We begin to realize that our family members are not only the people who test us, they are also the people most likely to reveal what needs care within us. They touch the places we usually hide from the world. At work, we may look composed. Among friends, we may seem calm. But at home, the mask comes off. There is less performance there, less distance, less pretend. Family sees the unguarded parts of us. And because of that, family often becomes the place where our deepest patterns rise to the surface. This is why it is so important not to rush too quickly into blame. Blame feels simple. It offers an immediate target. It says, if they would just change, I would be fine. And sometimes, yes, the other person does need to change. Sometimes there really is carelessness, insensitivity, harshness, or unfairness that must be named. Mindfulness does not ask us to deny reality, but it does ask us to look more deeply before we decide what is happening. It asks us to separate the outer event from the inner wound. It asks us to notice when today's pain is also carrying yesterday's sorrow. In this way, family becomes a kind of living meditation. Not a quiet one, not an easy one, but a real one. In meditation, we sit and watch the mind. We notice a thought arise. We notice a feeling arise. We notice the body tightening. We notice the urge to react. And instead of being swept away, we return to awareness. Family life asks for the same practice. A tense conversation begins. A child pushes back. A parent misunderstands. A spouse disappoints. And in that moment, we have a chance to watch what happens inside. Do we become defensive? Do we become fearful? Do we become controlling? Do we disappear? Do we harden? Do we demand to be right because being wrong feels unsafe? Each reaction tells us something. Each one points to a place in us that is asking to be understood with compassion, not shame. To live this way is not to become passive. It is not to accept harm without discernment. It is not to pretend that everything is loving when it is not. Rather, it is to meet our experience with enough honesty to see clearly. It is to admit, something in me feels threatened, or something in me feels unworthy, or something in me still wants approval, or something in me still fears being left behind. This kind of truth is not weakness. It is the beginning of freedom, because when we can name what is moving in us, we are less likely to let it control us. And when we are less controlled by and unconscious, we become capable of responding with wisdom. We can speak without attacking. We can listen without collapsing. We can set a boundary without hatred. We can disagree without making the other person the enemy. We can feel hurt without immediately becoming cruel. This is not a small transformation. It changes the whole atmosphere of a home. The family then becomes more than a place of friction. It becomes a place of practice, a place where the heart learns patience, a place where compassion becomes concrete, a place where love is tested, purified, and deepened. Not the shallow love that only survives when everyone is easy, but the stronger love that remains awake, even when people are tired, imperfect, wounded, and human. And perhaps this is the quiet gift hidden inside so much family suffering. It shows us where the heart still asks to be healed, not punished, not shamed, healed. It asks us to notice the places where we still need tenderness, the places where we still confuse old pain with present truth, the places where we still long to be loved in ways no human being can fully guarantee. Once we see that, we can begin to hold ourselves and one another with greater understanding. Then, instead of asking only, "Why are they doing this to me?" we can also ask, "What is this bringing up in me?" Instead of only reacting to the outside, we begin to listen to the inside, and in that listening, the practice of mindfulness truly begins. Once we begin to see our reactions clearly, we can look at the role of parents, not as people who must always please their children, but as guides who teach a deeper way of living. A good parent is not simply the one who makes the child smile in every moment. A good parent is not the one who says yes to every desire, removes every discomfort, and protects the child from every disappointment. Sometimes, the parent who loves most deeply is the one who can stand calmly in front of a child's anger and still say no with tenderness. Not because they wish to control, not because they enjoy authority, but because they understand that love without wisdom can become indulgence, and kindness without boundaries can quietly weaken the very person it wants to protect. Many parents suffer because they believe that to be loved by their children, they must never disappoint them. They must always be agreeable. They must become a source of comfort, entertainment, approval, and rescue. When the child is upset, the parent feels guilty. When the child complains, the parent feels they have failed. When the child says, "You don't understand me," the parent's heart trembles, and they may abandon their own clarity just to restore peace for one more evening. But peace that comes from avoiding every difficult teaching is not true peace. It is only a temporary silence. It is the quiet before the next wave of demand, confusion, or emotional collapse. Pleasing a child may end the argument today, but guiding a child builds the inner strength they will need for tomorrow. Pleasing seeks immediate harmony. Guiding seeks long-term freedom. There is a great difference between making life easy for a child and helping a child become capable of meeting life. If a parent rushes to remove every obstacle, the child may grow up believing that difficulty is always a sign that something is wrong. If a parent satisfies every wish, the child may never learn the beauty of patience. If a parent shields the child from every consequence, the child may never understand responsibility. And if a parent cannot bear to see the child struggle, the child may never discover the quiet dignity of standing up again after falling. True parental love is not cold. It is not harsh. It is not the old idea that children must suffer in order to become strong. The Dharma does not ask a parent to become hard. It asks a parent to become awake. Awake enough to know when comfort is medicine, and when comfort has become escape. Awake enough to know when a child needs a warm embrace, and when they need to be gently returned to their own responsibility. Awake enough to see that compassion is not always the removal of pain. Sometimes compassion is the steady presence that helps someone face pain without being destroyed by it. A father or mother who practices mindfulness learns to correct without humiliating. This is not easy. Many adults were corrected with shame when they were young. They were scolded as if mistakes were proof of badness. They were compared, threatened, mocked, or ignored. So when they become parents, the old language may rise in them before they even notice. The child spills something, lies about something, forgets something, fails at something, and suddenly the parent's voice becomes the voice of their own childhood. The same harshness returns through a new mouth. Mindfulness interrupts this inheritance. It creates a small space between the child's action and the parent's reaction. In that space, a parent can ask, what is truly needed here? Not, how do I release my frustration? Not, how do I make this child obey immediately so I can feel in control? But what response will help this child learn with dignity? There may still be firmness, there may still be consequences, but the child does not need to be crushed in order to be taught. A mistake can be named clearly without making the child feel worthless. A boundary can be held without violence in the eyes. A lesson can be given without turning love into a weapon. To protect a child without controlling them is another deep practice. Of course, children need protection. They are not born with mature judgment. They need guidance around danger, dishonesty, cruelty, addiction, distraction, and the many forces of the world that can pull the mind away from wisdom. But protection becomes control when the parent's fear begins to speak louder than the child's growth. Control says you must become what I need you to become so that I can feel safe. Protection says, I will help you learn how to see clearly so that one day you can walk wisely even when I am not beside you. This is a painful truth for many parents. The child does not belong to them. The child comes through them, depends on them, learns from them, may even resemble them. But the child has their own karma, their own mind, their own path, their own encounters with suffering and awakening. A parent can offer conditions. A parent can offer love, structure, example, and care, but a parent cannot live the child's life for them. To try to do so is to turn love into attachment, and attachment often disguises itself as devotion. It says, I only want the best for you, but underneath it may mean, I want you to choose the path that calms my anxiety. It says, I know what is right, but underneath it may mean, I cannot tolerate your difference. It says, after all I have done for you, but underneath it may mean, I need you to repay my sacrifices with obedience. Mindful parenting requires the courage to look at these hidden movements in the heart. It asks the parent to love the child, but not to be addicted to being praised by the child. It asks the parent to guide, but not to demand that the child's gratitude arrive on the parent's schedule. Sometimes a child will misunderstand a loving boundary. Sometimes they will call the parent unfair. Sometimes they will compare their home to another home. their rules to another family's rules, their parents to another parent who seems more permissive. In those moments, the parent may feel lonely. They may wonder, am I doing the right thing? And this is where wisdom must be stronger than the need to be liked. If the boundary comes from anger, it should be examined. If it comes from fear, it should be softened by understanding. But if it comes from clarity, compassion, and the sincere wish to help the child grow, then the parent must learn to remain steady. To listen without losing authority is also an art. Some parents believe that listening means surrendering. They fear that if they allow the child to speak freely, the child will become disrespectful. Other parents swing to the opposite side. They listen so much that they no longer guide. They become afraid of causing pain, afraid of saying no, afraid of being seen as old-fashioned or unkind. But mindful listening is neither domination nor collapse. It is a stable openness. It says, I hear your feelings, and your feelings matter. But your feelings are not the only truth in this room. A child needs to feel heard. When children are never heard, they may learn to hide. They may speak through rebellion, because calm speech was never welcomed. They may grow distant because closeness felt unsafe. But a child also needs to learn that being heard does not always mean being agreed with. This is a profound emotional education. It teaches them that love can remain even in disagreement. It teaches them that frustration is survivable. It teaches them that another person's no is not always rejection. In a world where many adults suffer because they cannot bear discomfort, this is one of the greatest gifts a parent can give. A parent also teaches compassion not mainly by lectures, but by atmosphere. Children may forget many words, but they absorb the emotional climate of the home. They notice how the parent speaks to a waiter, a cleaner, an elderly person, a beggar, a relative who has less power, a person who cannot offer anything in return. They notice whether kindness is only shown to important people. They notice whether respect appears when someone is inconvenient. They notice how the parent talks about those who are not present. And slowly, without formal instruction, the child learns what the parent truly values. If a parent says, be kind, but speaks with contempt toward the weak, the child hears the contempt more loudly than the instruction. If a parent says, don't lie, but constantly hides, exaggerates, or manipulates, the child learns that truth is optional when it is inconvenient. If a parent says, control your anger, but explodes whenever life becomes stressful, the child learns that anger is stronger than love. This does not mean a parent must be perfect. Perfection is not the teaching. Honesty is the teaching. Repair is the teaching. Humility is the teaching. One of the most beautiful things a parent can say to a child is, I was wrong, not as a performance, not to make the child responsible for the parent's guilt, but as a simple act of truth. I raised my voice. That was not right. I was upset, but I should not have spoken to you that way. Such words do not weaken a parent's authority. They purify it. They show the child that dignity does not come from never making mistakes. Dignity comes from returning to awareness. A child who sees an adult apologize learns that love can repair itself. They learn that accountability is not humiliation. They learn that being wrong is not the end of belonging. In the same way, children learn from how parents handle stress. When money is tight, when work is heavy, when illness appears, when plans fall apart, the home becomes a living classroom. Does the parent become cruel under pressure? Do they blame everyone around them? Do they disappear into silence? Do they numb themselves with distraction? Or can they say, this is difficult. I am worried. Let us breathe. Let us take one step at a time. The child watches. The child absorbs. The child learns not only what to think about suffering, but how to stand inside it. This is why self-reliance is not the opposite of love. It is one of love's mature forms. To teach a child self-reliance is not to abandon them. It is to prepare them for a life in which no parent can always be present. No comfort can always be guaranteed, and no road can be made completely smooth. A child needs affection. Yes, they need safety, encouragement, and tenderness, but they also need to learn how to make choices, how to experience consequences, how to reflect, how to begin again. If a child falls, the loving parent does not always need to rush in with panic. Sometimes the parent can kneel nearby and say, "I am here. Take your time. Can you stand?" This moment contains a whole philosophy of life. I am here. You are not alone, but your legs are yours. Your courage is yours. Your learning is yours. I will not steal from you the strength that can only be born when you discover your own capacity. There will be times when a parent must carry the child. There will be wounds too deep, fears too great, moments when support must be immediate and strong. But there will also be times when carrying the child too long prevents them from knowing they can walk. Wisdom is to know the difference. Compassion is not always soft in appearance. Sometimes, compassion has the firmness of a mountain. It remains unmoved, not because it does not care, but because it cares for something deeper than momentary comfort. A good parent, then, is not the one who creates a life without tears. No one can do that. A good parent is the one who helps a child understand tears without drowning in them, not the one who removes all frustration, but the one who teaches the child how to breathe through frustration, not the one who provides every answer, but the one who teaches the child how to look deeply, not the one who demands goodness through fear, but the one who plants goodness through example, patience, and steady presence. And perhaps this is why parenting is such a profound spiritual path. Every day, the parent is asked to meet their own impatience, their own fear, their own childhood wounds, their own hunger to be appreciated. Every day, the child becomes a mirror, not only a person to be raised, but a presence that reveals where the parent is still reactive, still attached, still seeking control, still learning how to love without possession. When a parent sees this, the home becomes more than a place of duty. It becomes a place of practice, the kitchen, the bedroom doorway, the car ride, the tired evening conversation, the argument over homework, the silence after a misunderstanding. All of these become moments of awakening, not dramatic awakening, not the kind spoken of in temples or books, but the quiet awakening of a person who pauses before speaking, softens before wounding, listens before judging, and chooses guidance over ego. But for parents to guide children wisely, they must first learn to observe their own minds. Because a child does not only hear what a parent says, the child absorbs how a parent lives. A child learns the atmosphere of a home long before the child understands the meaning of words. Before they can explain sadness, they feel the heaviness in the room. Before they can define anger, they recognize the sound of footsteps that are too loud, the way a door closes with force, the sharp breath before someone speaks. Before they know what love is, they feel it in the hand that gently covers them with a blanket, in the meal placed before them without complaint, in the adult who sits nearby without needing to dominate the moment. Children are listening even when they seem not to listen. They are watching even when their eyes are on their toys, their books, their screens, their small private worlds. A child may not remember every sentence a parent says, but the body remembers the tone. The body remembers whether the home felt like a safe harbor or a place where storms could appear at any moment. The body remembers whether mistakes were met with curiosity or humiliation, whether tears were welcomed or dismissed, whether silence meant peace or danger. This is why the practice of mindfulness in a family cannot be reduced to instruction. It is not enough for a parent to say, "Be calm." If the parent is always exploding, it is not enough to say, "Tell the truth." If the child sees adults hiding, blaming, or pretending, it is not enough to say, "Be kind," if kindness disappears whenever life becomes inconvenient. Children learn from the living mind of the household. They learn from the nervous system of the adults around them. A parent's nervous system becomes a kind of teaching. When difficulty appears, the child watches what happens. If a cup breaks, if someone is late, if money is tight, if grades are disappointing, if an elder is tired, if a promise is forgotten, the child is learning. They are learning whether life's problems are faced with shouting or with steadiness. They are learning whether love is withdrawn when someone fails. They are learning whether anger gives a person permission to be cruel. They are learning whether apology is a sign of weakness or a sign of maturity. In many homes, adults believe they are only reacting to the moment. They think, I shouted because I was tired. I criticized because I care. I slammed the door because I had too much pressure. But to a child, these reactions are not isolated. They become weather patterns. They become the climate of growing up. A child does not have the wisdom to say, my mother is overwhelmed by unresolved fear, or my father never learned how to regulate his pain. A child simply feels, this is what love sounds like. This is what family feels like. This is how people behave when life is hard. And later, when the child becomes older, they may repeat what they absorbed. They may avoid difficult conversations because avoidance was normal. They may shout when they feel scared because shouting was the language of power. They may blame others because blame was how discomfort was handled. Or they may become overly quiet, overly pleasing, overly careful, always reading the mood of the room. Because in childhood, they learned that peace depended on predicting the emotions of adults. This is not said to condemn parents. It is said to awaken them. Every parent carries wounds. Every elder carries habits. No one enters family life as a perfectly enlightened being. Most people love their children deeply, yet still pass down fear without intending to. They want to protect, but they control. They want to guide, but they shame. They want respect, but they demand it through intimidation. They want closeness, but they do not know how to be vulnerable. This is the human condition, and this is exactly where practice begins. Mindfulness in the home begins in very small moments. It begins when a parent notices the heat rising in the chest before answering. It begins when the jaw tightens, and instead of letting harsh words fly out, the parent takes one breath. Just one breath. Not a perfect breath, not a spiritual performance, simply a pause wide enough to prevent harm. In that pause, the child sees something extraordinary. They see that anger does not have to become violence. They see that frustration does not have to become insult. They see that a human being can feel strongly and still choose wisely. Imagine a child spilling water on the table after a long, exhausting day. One version of the moment is familiar. The adult snaps, "Why are you always so careless?" The child freezes, the water is wiped away, but something else remains. Shame remains. Fear remains. The lesson is not about water anymore. The lesson is, when I make a mistake, I become a problem, but another version is possible. The adult feels the irritation arise. The body wants to scold. The mind wants to release the stress of the day onto this small mistake. But the adult pauses, breathes, and says, I am tired, and I feel upset, but it is just water. Let's clean it up. In this version, the child still learns responsibility. The child still helps wipe the table, but the deeper lesson is different. The lesson is, mistakes can be repaired without losing love. This is not weakness. Compassion in the family is not weakness. It is not letting children do whatever they want. It is not avoiding discipline, boundaries, or difficult truths. True compassion has a backbone. It can say no. It can correct. It can refuse harmful behavior. But it does not need to humiliate in order to teach. It does not need to frighten in order to be heard. It does not confuse control with wisdom. A compassionate parent may say, I cannot allow you to speak that way to your sister, but the tone does not need to crush the child. A mindful elder may say, this behavior has consequences, but the eyes can still hold dignity, the voice can still carry care. The child can feel, I am being corrected, but I am not being rejected. This distinction is subtle, but it shapes a life. Many adults were raised to believe that fear creates respect. If a child is afraid to speak, afraid to disagree, afraid to make mistakes, the adult may think the child is obedient. But fear is not respect. Fear is a survival strategy. A child who fears a parent may comply on the outside while closing the heart on the inside. They may become polite but distant, quiet but resentful, successful but lonely. They may learn how to behave but not how to trust. Respect born from fear disappears when power disappears. But respect born from trust can last a lifetime. When a child grows up with an adult who is firm but fair, strong but not cruel, honest but not shaming, that child learns a deeper form of reverence. They do not respect because they are terrified. They respect because they have witnessed integrity. They have seen an adult apologize. They have seen an adult keep a promise. They have seen an adult calm themselves before speaking. They have seen power used to protect, not to dominate. One of the most powerful teachings a parent can offer is the willingness to admit a mistake. In many families, adults believe they must always appear right. They fear that apologizing will reduce their authority. But the opposite is often true. When a parent says, "I shouted earlier and that was not right," something softens in the child's world. The child learns that accountability is possible. The child learns that love can repair itself. The child learns that being older does not mean being beyond learning. A simple sentence can become a lifelong teaching. "I was upset, but I did not want to hurt you. I am sorry for the way I spoke." These words do not erase the harm completely, but they open a door. They show the child that emotions can be named without being weaponized. They show that relationships are not destroyed by conflict when there is humility. They show that a human being can return after losing balance. Returning is one of the deepest practices in family life. Not every conversation will be handled well. Not every day will be peaceful. Sometimes a parent will react too quickly. Sometimes a child will say something painful. Sometimes silence will grow between people who love each other. But the practice is to return. After cooling down, return. After reflecting, after pride begins to loosen its grip, return. A parent might knock gently on the door and say, "Can we talk again? I don't think I listened well before." This moment may look ordinary, but it is sacred. It teaches that the relationship is more important than the argument. It teaches that no one has to remain trapped in the worst moment of the day. It teaches that love is not merely a feeling. It is the willingness to come back with more awareness. Children who grow up with this kind of practice do not become perfect. They still struggle. They still feel anger, jealousy, disappointment, confusion. But they have seen a path. Somewhere in their memory, there is an image of an adult breathing before responding. Somewhere in their body, there is the feeling of being corrected without being destroyed. Somewhere in their heart, there is proof that strength and tenderness can live together. And if you are a parent or an elder listening to this, perhaps the invitation is not to become flawless. That burden is too heavy, and it is not the path of wisdom. The invitation is to become more awake, to notice the emotional climate you create, to understand that your presence speaks, your sighs speak, your silence speaks, your anger speaks, your gentleness speaks, your way of handling disappointment speaks. The child may forget the lecture, but they will remember whether your face softened when they were afraid. They may forget the rule, but they will remember whether you listened when they tried to explain. They may forget the exact advice, but they will remember whether home felt like a place where their heart could breathe. This does not mean parents must hide all sadness or frustration. A home where adults pretend to be calm all the time is not real mindfulness. Children do not need artificial perfection. They need honest humanity held with awareness. It is all right for a parent to say, "I am having a difficult day, so I need a few minutes to breathe." It is all right to say, "I feel disappointed, but I want to speak carefully. It is all right to say, I am angry, and because I love you, I am going to pause before we continue. These sentences are not just communication, they are seeds. They teach the child to recognize inner states. They teach that feelings are not enemies. They teach that anger can be held, sadness can be named, and disappointment can be expressed without cruelty. This is emotional inheritance. This is Dharma at the dinner table. This is meditation in the hallway, in the car, beside the sink. In the small space between impulse and action, a family becomes a field of practice when each person begins to see that the mind is always being transmitted, not through sermons, but through presence, not through rules alone, but through repeated examples. The home asks every adult a quiet question. What are you teaching when you are tired? What are you teaching when you do not get your way? What are you teaching when someone disappoints you? What are you teaching when you hold power over someone smaller, younger, more dependent, more vulnerable? To answer these questions honestly is not easy. It may bring sadness. It may reveal patterns passed down through generations. You may remember your own childhood, the voices that frightened you, the silence that confused you, the tenderness you needed but did not receive. And yet, seeing this is not the end. It is the beginning of freedom. What was passed down unconsciously can be transformed consciously. What was inherited as pain can become practice. What once wounded you does not have to wound the next person through you. In the Buddhist path, loving kindness is not only a feeling we offer when life is peaceful. It is a discipline of the heart, especially when the heart is under pressure. In family life, loving kindness means remembering the humanity of the person in front of us, even when we are correcting them. It means seeing the child not as an obstacle to our peace, but as a being learning how to live. It means seeing the parent not only as an authority, but as a human being also carrying fear and fatigue. It means seeing that every reaction has consequences, and every mindful pause has the power to change the future. The deepest lessons children receive are not always spoken. They are absorbed in the way love moves through the home. So let the home become a place where discipline and tenderness are not enemies. Let it become a place where mistakes are met with responsibility, not shame. Let it become a place where adults do not demand respect through fear, but cultivate a presence worthy of trust. Let it become a place where children can learn that being human includes strong emotions, but also the capacity to return to kindness. And yet, family practice is not only for parents. Every person in the home, young or old, has the responsibility to look inward and participate in the healing of the household. In every family, there comes a quiet moment when each person must stop pointing outward and begin looking inward. Because the pain caused by others is imaginary, not because every wound is your fault, but because peace cannot grow in a house where everyone waits for someone else to become mindful first. It is very easy, in family life, to believe, if only they changed, I would be peaceful. If my father were softer, I would not be so angry. If my mother stopped worrying, I could breathe. If my child listened, I would not lose my temper. If my spouse understood me, I would not withdraw. If my sibling apologized, I could finally let go. This way of thinking feels reasonable because it often begins with something true. Other people do affect us. Their words enter the room. Their moods touch our nervous system. Their habits can exhaust us. Their neglect, criticism, silence, or impatience can leave marks that are not easy to erase. But Buddhist practice does not stop at the surface of what happened. It asks a deeper question, a more difficult question, and also a more liberating one. What am I feeding inside myself right now? This question changes everything, because in the moment of conflict, we are not only dealing with another person, we are also dealing with our own mind. We are dealing with the story we are repeating, the resentment we are protecting, the pride we refuse to put down. the fear that disguises itself as anger, the sadness that turns into blame, the loneliness that becomes a harsh sentence. We are dealing with the ancient habit of believing that our suffering is completely created by someone else, and therefore our peace must wait until they behave differently. But if peace depends entirely on another person's transformation, then our heart becomes a prisoner of their level of awareness. And this is a very fragile way to live. To take responsibility for our own mind is not to excuse harm. It is not to say, they hurt me, but it does not matter. It does not mean allowing someone to disrespect you, manipulate you, or cross your boundaries again and again while you smile in the name of compassion. True compassion is not weakness. True patience is not self-abandonment. True loving kindness does not ask you to disappear. Responsibility is different from blame. Blame says, and because of you, I am like this. Shame says, this is my fault and I am bad for feeling this way. Responsibility says, this pain is here, this reaction is here, this moment is difficult, and still I have a choice in how I meet it. That choice may be small at first, it may not feel like freedom. Sometimes responsibility begins with something as simple as noticing that your voice is rising, noticing that your body has become tense, noticing that you are about to say the same sentence you have said 100 times, the sentence that never heals anything but always returns like a stone thrown into the same window. Responsibility begins in that brief space before the old pattern takes over. In a family, everyone brings something into the shared space. No one arrives empty-handed. Each person carries a history, a hunger, a fear, a way of asking for love, a way of defending against pain. A parent may control because deep inside they are afraid of losing connection. They may think they are being responsible. They may believe that if they do not correct every choice, warn against every danger, and manage every detail, the child will drift away, fail, or suffer. But beneath the controlling voice, there may be a trembling love, an old wound, a fear that says, if I do not hold tightly, I will lose them. And yet, when love becomes control, it can suffocate the very bond it wants to protect. The child does not feel loved. The child feels watched, judged, and trapped. A child may rebel not because they hate the family, but because they feel unheard. Their anger may be a rough form of saying, please see me. Please stop deciding who I am before I have had the chance to know myself. A slammed door, a cold reply, a refusal to cooperate may be more than disrespect. It may be pain without language. It may be a young heart trying to create space in the only way it knows. This does not make harmful behavior acceptable, but it helps us look more deeply. When we see only the behavior, we react. When we see the suffering beneath the behavior, wisdom becomes possible. A spouse may withdraw because they feel criticized before they even speak. They may go quiet, not because they do not care, but because they have learned that every conversation turns into a trial, and every answer becomes evidence against them. Silence can be a shield. Distance can be an attempt to survive, but when silence becomes a habit, it also becomes a wall. The other person feels abandoned, and then reaches with more intensity, more accusation, more desperation. One withdraws because they feel attacked, the other attacks because they feel alone, and the wheel continues. This is how family suffering often works. One person's defense becomes another person's wound. One person's fear becomes another person's burden. One person's silence becomes another person's rage. One person's control becomes another person's rebellion. And because everyone is hurting, everyone believes they are only reacting. But when everyone is only reacting, no one is truly free. Mindfulness enters like a small lamp in a dark room. It does not immediately remove the mess. It does not erase the past. But it allows us to see what is actually happening. Before anger becomes speech, there is usually a spark. Before the spark becomes fire, there is usually a sensation, a tightening in the chest, heat in the face, a pressure behind the eyes, the jaw locking, the stomach sinking, the breath becoming short. The body often knows before the mind admits it. Mindfulness teaches us to listen to these early signals. You may notice the urge to interrupt before the other person finishes. You may notice the need to win, to prove, to correct, to dominate the conversation. You may notice the old sentence rising to your tongue. You always do this. You never listen. I knew you would say that. You are just like. And if you are awake enough in that moment, you may realize that the sentence is not just communication. It is a weapon you have used before. It carries history. It carries poison. It may feel satisfying for 1 second, but it leaves a wound that lasts much longer. The practice is to pause before giving that sentence your voice. The pause is not passive. The pause is not weakness. The pause is spiritual strength in its most ordinary form. It is the moment you refuse to let your suffering drive the car. It is the moment you say inwardly, I see you anger, I see you fear, I see you pride. You are here, but you do not have to speak for me. This kind of practice is very difficult in the family, because family members know where we are tender. They know the old doors. They know the words that can open our deepest irritation. And sometimes, without even intending to, they touch the exact place we have not healed. A stranger's criticism may pass through us quickly, but one disappointed look from a parent can stay in the body for days. A small comment from a spouse can awaken years of feeling unseen. A child's rejection can make a parent feel like a failure. Family has this power because family is close to our longing. We do not merely want them to behave well. We want them to understand us. We want them to love us in the way we needed. We want them to repair old places, even when they may not know how. This is why inner honesty is essential before, are they wrong? We can ask, what am I adding to this moment? This does not mean the other person is right. It does not mean we must agree. It simply means we are brave enough to examine our own contribution to the suffering in the room. Is my speech making the situation clearer or more painful? Is my tone carrying respect or contempt? Is my silence peaceful or is it punishment? Am I trying to understand or am I trying to win? Am I setting a boundary or am I trying to hurt them back? Am I speaking the truth or am I throwing my pain at someone and calling it honesty? These questions are not easy. They humble us. They take away the pleasure of being completely innocent in our own story. But they also give us back power, because if I can see what I am contributing, then I can begin to change it. If I can see how my pride tightens the room, I can soften. If I can see how my fear becomes control, I can loosen my grip. If I can see how my hurt becomes accusation, I can speak more directly. If I can see how my silence becomes coldness, I can return with one honest sentence in a family. Spiritual maturity begins when each person stops waiting to be understood before becoming understanding. Someone has to begin. Someone has to breathe first. Someone has to notice the pattern and decide, even imperfectly, not to feed it. This does not mean one person must do all the emotional labor forever. It does not mean the most mindful person becomes responsible for everyone else's behavior. A family becomes healthier when responsibility is shared. Parents must look at their reactions. Children, as they grow, must look at theirs. Partners must look at the ways they protect themselves and the ways they wound each other. Even elders, with all their experience, are not beyond practice. Age does not automatically make the mind free. Sometimes old habits become stronger simply because they have been repeated for many years. To live together is to affect one another constantly. Your mood enters the kitchen. Your impatience sits at the dinner table. Your resentment waits in the hallway. Your tenderness also spreads. Your calm changes the air. Your apology opens a window. Your willingness to listen can slow down the whole storm. Nothing in a family is completely private, because the inner life of each person becomes part of the atmosphere everyone breathes. This is why tending to your own mind is not selfish. It is an act of care for the whole household. When you practice with your anger, you are not only protecting yourself from regret, you are protecting your family from another unnecessary wound. When you practice with your fear, you are not only becoming stronger, you are making it safer for others to be honest with you. When you practice with your pride, you are not losing dignity. You are creating the possibility of real closeness. When you practice with your pain, you are no longer passing it forward unconsciously. There may be moments when you are the only one practicing. This can feel lonely. You may think, why should I be mindful when they are not? But mindfulness is not a bargain. It is not something we do only when others deserve it. It is a way of protecting the quality of our own heart. If someone else is unskillful, we do not have to become unskillful with them. If someone else speaks harshly, we do not have to hand them the remote control to our tongue. If someone else is lost in their suffering, we can choose not to become lost in ours. At the same time, wisdom knows when to step away. Sometimes the most mindful response is not to continue the conversation. Sometimes responsibility sounds like, I cannot speak about this while we are both angry. I need time to calm down. Sometimes it sounds like, I want to understand you, but I cannot accept being insulted. Sometimes it sounds like leaving the room, taking a walk, calling a trusted friend, or seeking help. Mindfulness does not require us to stay in the fire and pretend we are not burning. It teaches us to know the fire clearly and to act without adding more fuel. Over time, these small acts of responsibility reshape the family. Not dramatically at first, not like a sudden miracle, more like water softening stone, one pause, one softer reply, one moment of listening instead of defending, one apology offered without excuses, one boundary spoken without hatred, one breath taken before the old wound becomes the old weapon. And slowly, the home begins to change because the people inside it are changing. The family becomes less of a battlefield where everyone fights to be right, and more of a practice ground where everyone learns how to suffer less and love more wisely. Every family member is responsible for their own mind. This is not a heavy sentence. It is an invitation. It means we are not powerless. It means the next moment is not completely determined by the last one. It means even if pain has been passed down through generations, awareness can begin here, in this breath, in this room, in this conversation, in this person who is willing to look inward and say, let the healing start with the way I meet this moment. And the clearest place to practice this responsibility is in speech, because in family life, one sentence can either become a wound or become a bridge. And in family life, words do not disappear after they are spoken. They stay in the air. They sit at the dinner table. They follow a child into adulthood. They echo in a parent's heart long after the argument has ended. Sometimes a person does not remember the exact day something happened, but they remember the sentence. They remember the tone. They remember the look on someone's face when those words were released. Many family wounds are not made from one terrible event. They are made from repeated sentences. Small sentences, thrown casually, again and again, until they become part of the emotional weather of the home. A mother says, I'm only telling you this for your own good. But the child hears, you are never enough. A father says, why can't you be more like your brother? And perhaps he thinks he is motivating, but something inside the child begins to shrink. A husband says, you're too sensitive, and a wife learns to swallow her sadness. A wife says, you never do anything right, and a husband stops trying to open his heart. In many homes, criticism is disguised as advice. Sarcasm is disguised as humor. Silence is disguised as peace. And truth is spoken without tenderness, as if being honest gives us permission to be cruel. But in the path of mindfulness, speech is not only a way to express what we think. Speech is a practice. Speech is karma. Speech is the hand we extend toward another person's heart. It can push them away, or it can invite them closer. It can burn a bridge. or it can become the first plank laid down across a long distance of misunderstanding. The Buddha taught that right speech is not simply about avoiding lies. It is about learning to speak in a way that reduces suffering. Before words leave the mouth, we are invited to pause and look deeply, not with fear, not with repression, but with awareness. Because once a word has been released, it cannot fully be taken back. We may apologize, we may repair, we may explain, but the wound may still need time to heal. So before speaking, especially in family, we can ask 4 simple questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is this the right time? These questions are not meant to make us silent in the face of pain. They are not meant to turn us into people who never speak honestly. They are meant to help us speak in a way that does not create more suffering than needed. The first question is it true? This seems simple, but in a moment of emotion, we often speak from exaggeration. We say, "You never listen. You always make everything about you. Nobody in this family cares about me. You are impossible." These statements may feel true when we are hurt, but they are usually not the whole truth. They are pain speaking in the language of permanence. They take one moment, or many moments, and turn them into an identity. Mindful speech begins by returning to what is real. Instead of saying "you never listen," we might say, "When I was speaking just now and you looked at your phone, I felt unheard." This is more precise. It does not accuse the person's entire character. It describes a moment, an action, and the feeling that arose. It leaves room for understanding. Instead of saying, "You don't care about this family," we might say, "I feel overwhelmed when I have to handle these responsibilities alone." Instead of saying, "You are selfish," we might say, "I felt hurt when my need was not considered." This is not weakness. This is courage with clarity. The second question is it necessary? Not every true thing must be spoken in every moment. This is difficult to accept, especially when we feel righteous. We may think, "But it is true, so I have the right to say it." But mindfulness asks us to look deeper. What is the purpose of speaking this now? Is it to help? Is it to clarify? Is it to protect a boundary? Or is it to punish, to win, to release our anger into someone else's body? There are times when silence is wise. There are times when a comment does not need to be made. If a child makes a small mistake while learning, does every mistake need a lecture? If a spouse forgets something after a tiring day, does that moment need to become evidence in a long case against them? If an aging parent repeats a story, do we need to correct every detail? Sometimes love means allowing small imperfections to pass without turning them into a courtroom. But there are also times when speaking is necessary. Mindful speech is not avoidance. If harm is happening, if resentment is growing, if a boundary has been crossed, silence can become another form of suffering. The question is not, "How do I avoid discomfort?" The question is, what needs to be said for understanding, healing, and protection to become possible? The third question is it kind? Kindness does not mean softness without strength. Kindness does not mean smiling while we betray ourselves. Kindness means we remember that the person in front of us is also a human being, even when we disagree, even when we are hurt, even when we must say something difficult. There is a way to speak firmly without violence. We can say, "I need to say this clearly." We can say, "I feel hurt when this happens." We can say, "I want us to understand each other, not attack each other." We can say, "I am willing to talk, but I am not willing to be insulted." We can say, "This matters to me, and I need you to hear it." These sentences do not collapse into blame. They do not throw fire. They stand upright. They tell the truth without trying to destroy the other person. This is an important distinction. Many people believe that if they stop speaking harshly, they will lose their power. But harshness is not power. Harshness is often pain without discipline. Real power is the ability to remain connected to your own dignity while speaking what must be spoken. A parent can correct a child without shaming them. A child can disagree with a parent without humiliating them. A husband and wife can discuss disappointment without turning each other into enemies. A sibling can name an old wound without using it as a weapon. This is the training of speech as loving kindness. The fourth question is this the right time? Even true, necessary, and kind words can fail when spoken at the wrong moment. A person who is exhausted may not be able to listen. A person who is angry may hear everything as an attack. A person who feels publicly embarrassed may defend themselves instead of opening. Timing is part of compassion. Many family arguments become worse, not because the issue is impossible, but because the timing is unskillful. We bring up a painful subject when someone is rushing out the door. We criticize in front of other people. We demand deep understanding from someone who has just come home from a draining day. We begin a serious conversation when our own nervous system is already burning. Mindful timing asks, can this wait until both of us have more space? Sometimes the most loving sentence is, this is important, but I don't want to talk about it while we are both upset. Can we return to it later? Or, I want to hear you, but I need a few minutes to calm down so I don't speak in a way I regret. This is not running away. This is protecting the conversation from becoming another wound in family. Mindful speech also includes mindful listening. We often think communication means expressing ourselves clearly, but half of speech is listening. Maybe more than half, because if no one is truly listening, words become arrows flying across a battlefield. Deep listening is a quiet form of generosity. It means we listen without preparing our counterattack. We listen without immediately correcting every detail. We listen without reducing the other person to their worst sentence, their worst habit, their worst mistake. We listen not only to the words, but to the pain beneath the words. When a parent complains, perhaps beneath the complaint is fear of becoming irrelevant. When a child argues, perhaps beneath the anger is a longing to be respected. When a spouse becomes cold, perhaps beneath the distance is disappointment that has not found a safe language. When a sibling brings up the past, perhaps they are not trying to destroy the present, but asking, clumsily, for their pain to finally be acknowledged. Deep listening does not mean we agree with everything. It does not mean we accept false accusations. It does not mean we become passive. It means we make enough inner space to understand before we respond. Sometimes we can simply say, let me see if I understand what you mean, or I hear that this hurt you, or I don't see it exactly the same way, but I want to understand your experience. These sentences can soften a room. They can slow down the old machinery of reaction. So many family conflicts continue because each person is secretly begging, please understand my pain, while outwardly saying, you are wrong. And because the words come wrapped in blame, the other person defends instead of listens. Then both people feel more alone than before. To practice mindful speech is to translate the language of attack into the language of truth. You never listen becomes, I feel lonely when I speak and do not feel heard. You only care about yourself becomes, I need to feel that my needs matter in this relationship too. You are always controlling me becomes, I need more room to make my own choices. You're just like your father becomes. When you speak in that tone, I feel scared and I shut down. You don't appreciate anything I do becomes, I feel tired and unseen and I need some acknowledgement. You are too sensitive becomes, I didn't realize my words affected you that way. Help me understand. This transformation may seem small, but it changes the direction of the whole conversation. Reactive speech corners the other person. Mindful speech opens a door. Reactive speech says, you are the problem. Mindful speech says, there is suffering here. Can we look at it together? Of course, this practice is not easy, especially with family. A stranger may insult us and we might remain calm. But one sentence from a parent can send us back to childhood. One look from a spouse can awaken years of unmet longing. One comment from a sibling can touch an old rivalry we thought we had outgrown. Family speech is powerful because family history lives inside every word. That is why we practice slowly. We do not expect ourselves to speak perfectly. We begin by noticing the tightening in the chest before we interrupt, noticing the urge to be sarcastic, noticing the pleasure of saying something sharp, noticing the fear that if we speak gently, we will not be heard, noticing the old belief that love must be loud to be real. Then we breathe. One breath can save a family from one unnecessary wound. One pause can prevent a sentence that would take years to heal. One moment of awareness can change the inheritance being passed to the next generation. For a parent, mindful speech is one of the greatest gifts to a child. A good mother or father is not someone who always pleases their children. A good parent is someone who teaches a child how to live with awareness, compassion, and inner strength. And children learn this not mainly from lectures but from the emotional climate of the home. They learn from how adults speak when tired, how adults agree, how adults tell the truth, how adults repair after hurting someone. A child who grows up hearing, "I was angry, but I should not have spoken to you that way," learns humility. A child who hears, "Your feelings matter, even when I cannot give you everything you want," learns respect. A child who hears, "Let's talk when we can both listen," learns emotional responsibility. These are teachings deeper than rules. They become the child's inner voice, and adults need this healing too. Many of us speak harshly because we were spoken to harshly. We repeat tones we never wanted to inherit. We use words that once wounded us because no one taught us another way. But the path of practice says, we are not condemned to continue what we received. Awareness can interrupt inheritance. Compassion can begin in the mouth. A new family culture can begin with one person choosing not to pass the fire forward. This does not mean every conversation will become peaceful. It does not mean every family member will respond with maturity. Sometimes you will speak carefully, and the other person will still react. Sometimes you will listen deeply, and they will still misunderstand you. Mindful speech is not a technique to control others. It is a practice to keep your own heart clean while you communicate. It is a way of refusing to let pain turn you into someone who creates more pain. There may be conversations where the most mindful speech is a boundary. I cannot continue this conversation if we are insulting each other. I will come back when we can speak respectfully. I love you, but I will not accept being spoken to this way. These words can be compassionate, because compassion includes yourself. Loving kindness that excludes your own heart is incomplete in the home. Every word is a seed. Some seeds grow into fear, some grow into trust, some grow into distance, some grow into courage. We may not see the fruit immediately, but nothing is wasted. The sentence you choose not to say may become peace. The apology you offer may become safety. The gentle truth you speak may become a bridge. Someone crosses years later, so before the next conversation, pause. Feel the breath entering and leaving the body. Notice the face of the person in front of you. Remember that this person too wants to be free from suffering, even if they do not know how to show it skillfully. Remember that you too deserve to speak without betraying your heart. And then let your words become part of the path. Let them be truthful enough to be trusted, necessary enough to be meaningful, kind enough to be received, timed well enough to be useful. In this way, family life becomes a daily meditation, not only on the cushion, not only in silence, but in the living room, in the kitchen, in the car, at the doorway, in the ordinary moments where love is tested by tone and patience is tested by familiarity. Each sentence becomes a chance to wake up. Each reaction becomes a mirror. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to suffer less and understand more. But even when we learn to speak more carefully, there will still be anger, disappointment, and pain. The next practice is learning how to sit with those emotions without letting them rule the home. And so we arrive at one of the most difficult rooms in the house, the room of anger. Not the anger we talk about in theory, not the anger we analyze when we are calm, wise, and sitting far away from the person who triggered us, but the anger that rises suddenly at the dinner table, the anger that appears when a parent repeats the same criticism again, the anger that comes when a child refuses to listen, when a spouse speaks with coldness, when a sibling touches an old wound with only one careless sentence. This is the anger that lives not in books, but in the body. It tightens the jaw, it heats the face, it makes the breath shorter, it makes the heart feel as if it must defend itself immediately or disappear. In family life, anger often comes not because love is absent, but because love is complicated. We care deeply, and because we care, we are easily hurt. We expect more from those closest to us. We want them to understand without needing so many explanations. We want them to remember what matters to us. We want them to see our effort, our fatigue, our loneliness, our quiet sacrifices, and when they do not see, or when they see but respond harshly, something inside us burns. Often, anger is only the surface level. Beneath it, there may be fear. Fear of being disrespected, fear of being forgotten, fear that our children will lose their way, fear that our parents will never understand who we have become, fear that our partner is drifting away. Beneath anger, there may be hurt, disappointment, shame, exhaustion, or a longing that has never learned how to speak gently. A father may shout at his child, but beneath the shouting is panic. I am afraid you will suffer if you continue like this. A mother may criticize, but beneath the criticism is a lonely wish. Please understand how much I have carried. A child may answer with sharp words, but beneath those words is a trembling voice. Please see me as I am, not only as your expectation. A partner may become cold and silent, but beneath that silence may be the pain of not knowing how to ask, do I still matter to you? When we look only at the anger, we see an enemy. But when we look deeply with the eyes of mindfulness, we begin to see that anger is often a messenger. It is not always a wise messenger. It may arrive violently. It may knock over chairs inside the heart. It may speak in a language that hurts others. But still, it is carrying news from a place we have not yet listened to. The practice is not to pretend we never feel anger. That would only create another kind of violence within us. To practice the path in family life does not mean becoming a person who smiles while secretly burning. It does not mean suppressing the storm and calling it peace. True peace is not the absence of strong emotion. True peace is the capacity to meet strong emotion without becoming its servant. Anger itself is not the deepest problem. The problem is what we do when anger takes control of our hands, our eyes, our voice, and our memory. Under the control of anger, we may shout words that leave bruises in the mind. We may insult someone we love, not because the insult is true, but because we want them to feel the pain we are feeling. We may threaten, punish, slam doors, withdraw affection, or turn silence into a weapon. We may reach into the past and bring out old mistakes, not to heal them, but to strike again. We may say, you or you never, and in that moment, we no longer see a living person in front of us. We see only a story, a wound, a judgment. This is how a home becomes unsafe, not always through one great tragedy, but through small repeated moments when anger is allowed to rule without mindfulness. A child learns to fear the sound of footsteps. A parent learns to stop sharing their true feelings. A partner learns to measure every word before speaking. People still live under the same roof, but their hearts begin to hide in separate rooms. That is why anger must be treated with great respect, not worshipped, not obeyed, not hated, but respected as a powerful energy. Like fire, it can cook food, warm the house, and bring light, but if carried without care, it can burn the very place we are trying to protect. In the practice of mindfulness, anger can become a A bell does not insult us, a bell does not condemn us. A bell simply rings to wake us up. When anger rises, it is as if life is saying, stop, come back. Something important is happening inside you. Do not speak yet. Do not act yet. Return to your breath before you make the wound deeper. This awesome stopping is not weakness. It is training. It is the strength to refuse to let a passing storm decide the future of a relationship. Many people think power means speaking immediately, winning the argument, proving the other person wrong. But in the light of practice, real power is the ability to pause when every habit in you wants to attack. Real power is feeling the fire and choosing not to throw it. The body is the first place to return to. Before we can speak wisely, before we can understand the other person, we must first know what anger feels like inside us. Maybe the chest is tight. Maybe the stomach is hard. Maybe the shoulders rise. Maybe the hands tremble. Maybe the breath becomes shallow and fast. Instead of being lost in the story, they are wrong, they are unfair, they are impossible, we can gently say, anger is here, heat is here, hurt is here. I am suffering right now. This naming is simple, but it changes everything. When we say, I am angry, we may still be completely identified with the anger. But when we say anger is here, there is a little space. We are not denying it, but we are also not becoming it. We are the one who can observe. We are the one who can breathe. We are the one who can protect. And in that space, even a small one, freedom begins. In a family, it is helpful to learn the art of stepping away without abandoning. Some people step away as punishment. They disappear, close the door, refuse to speak for days, and make the other person feel unworthy of care. That is not a mindful pause. That is another form of aggression. A mindful pause is different. It says, either in words or in attitude, I am too angry to speak clearly right now. I do not want to hurt you. I am going to take a little time to breathe, and I will come back. These words can save a family from many unnecessary wounds. Imagine being able to say, I need 10 minutes. I am not leaving this conversation. I am protecting it. Or, I care about what we are talking about, but my mind is not steady. Let me calm down first. Or, I can feel myself wanting to say something hurtful. I do not want to do that to you. This is not avoidance. This is responsibility. We do not step away to escape the truth. We step away so that when we return, we are capable of telling the truth without cruelty. During the pause, the practice is very concrete. Feel the feet on the ground. Breathe in slowly, as if you are inviting cool air into a burning room. Breathe out longer than you breathe in, allowing the body to know that it does not need to fight at this exact second. Place a hand on the chest, not as a performance, but as a quiet gesture of care. The hand says, I am here. I know you are hurting. I will not abandon you to this storm. Then name what is beneath the anger, not to justify harmful behavior, but to understand. I feel unappreciated. I feel afraid. I feel dismissed. I feel powerless. I feel tired. I feel like no one is listening. Sometimes, when the deeper feeling is named, the anger softens by itself. It was only trying to guard a wound that had no other protector. This is especially important for parents. A good father or mother is not someone who never becomes angry. Children do not need perfect parents. They need honest, practicing parents. But a parent must learn that anger has weight. A parent's voice can become the inner voice of a child for many years. A sentence spoken in rage may be remembered long after the parent has forgotten it. So the practice of pausing is not only for the parent's peace, it is a form of protection for the child's future. To teach children mindfulness, compassion, and self-reliance, we cannot only give instructions when the house is calm. We teach most deeply by how we behave when we are triggered. A child watches. What does my mother do when she is angry? What does my father do when he feels disrespected? Do they explode? Do they blame everyone else? Do they apologize? Do they return? Do they repair? If a child sees an adult pause, breathe, and come back with more steadiness, that child learns a lesson no lecture can provide. They learn that emotions are not enemies, but they must be held carefully. They learn that love does not mean never hurting each other. It means not being careless with the hurt. They learn that dignity is not in always being right, but in being willing to wake up. And this brings us to one of the most healing practices in the family: apology. Many people are afraid to apologize because they think it will make them small. They think if they say, "I was wrong," they will lose authority. A parent may fear losing respect. A spouse may fear losing ground. A sibling may fear looking weak. But in truth, a sincere apology is not humiliation, it is courage. It is the willingness to place love above pride. It is the strength to say, "My anger was real, but the way I expressed it caused harm. I take responsibility for that." An apology does not erase the need for boundaries. It does not mean the other person was completely right. It does not mean we accept mistreatment. It simply separates our pain from our unskillful action. We can say, "I was hurt, and I still should not have shouted." We can say, "I felt ignored, but I should not have insulted you." We can say, "I need to talk about what happened, but first I want to acknowledge that my reaction was harmful." This kind of apology changes the atmosphere of a home. It teaches everyone that repair is possible. It shows children that adults are still learning. It shows parents that their children's hearts are not closed forever. It shows partners that conflict does not have to become exile. Something broken can be touched with care. A harsh moment does not have to become a permanent wall. But apology must be more than a word. "Sorry," said quickly. Just to end discomfort does not heal deeply. A real apology includes awareness. It includes the willingness to listen to how the other person was affected. It includes the intention to practice differently next time. Not perfectly, perhaps, but sincerely. The family does not need perfection. The family needs trust that each person is trying not to repeat the same harm unconsciously. And, if we are the one receiving the apology, our practice is also important. We do not have to pretend we are healed immediately. Forgiveness cannot be forced like a command, but we can recognize the courage it takes for someone to return with humility. We can allow space for repair without using their apology as a new weapon. If someone bows their heart and says, "I see what I did," we can still be honest about our pain, but we do not need to crush the seed of their awakening. In this way, anger becomes part of the path. Not because anger is beautiful in itself, but because it reveals where mindfulness is needed most. It shows us the places where love is mixed with fear, where care is mixed with control, where longing is hidden beneath blame. It shows us how quickly we can lose ourselves with the people we love most. And it also shows us that we can return. Every family has moments when the bell of anger rings. The question is not whether it will ring. It will. The question is whether we hear it as a call to war or a call to wakefulness. If we hear it as a call to war, we gather our arguments, sharpen our words, and prepare to defeat someone who is actually part of our life. But if we hear it as a bell of mindfulness, we stop, we breathe, we look at the person in front of us and remember, this is not my enemy. This is someone who suffers just as I suffer. This is someone I do not want to destroy with my pain. There may still be a difficult conversation. There may still be consequences, boundaries, and truth that must be spoken clearly. Loving kindness does not mean allowing harmful behavior to continue. Compassion is not passivity, but when mindfulness is present, even firmness can be clean. We can say no without hatred. We can protect ourselves without revenge. We can disagree without dehumanizing. We can be honest without making our honesty into a knife. This is the deep training of the home. It is easy to feel peaceful alone when no one interrupts our rhythm, questions our choices, or touches our old wounds. But family life does not allow us to keep a polished image of ourselves for long. It reveals us. It shows us where our practice is still young. It asks us to bring meditation into the hallway, into the argument, into the moment after the door closes. into the breath before the next sentence. And perhaps, little by little, we begin to understand. The goal is not to create a family where anger never appears. The goal is to create a family where anger is not allowed to become the ruler. A family where people can feel strongly and still remain responsible. A family where someone can say, "I need to pause," and others understand that this pause is an act of care. A family where apology is not rare, where repair is not shameful, where love is not measured by the absence of conflict, but by the willingness to return with a softer heart. When anger is held in this way, it begins to change. It no longer has to scream to be heard. It no longer has to destroy in order to prove that pain exists. It becomes a doorway into deeper honesty. It teaches us where we are wounded. It teaches us what we need to express. It teaches us how much we still have to learn about protecting both ourselves and the people we love. And when the fire begins to cool, when the breath becomes wider, when the face softens and the hands unclench, another kind of seeing becomes possible. We are no longer looking only at the behavior that hurt us. We begin to sense the suffering behind it. We begin to wonder what burden this person has been carrying, what fear has shaped their words, what unmet need has made them hard to reach. When anger softens, another doorway opens, the doorway of seeing the suffering behind the behavior of the people we live with. Sometimes, the person who hurts us is not trying to be cruel in the simple way we imagine. Sometimes, they are speaking from a wound so old that they no longer recognize it as pain. A father who cannot say, "I am proud of you," may have lived his whole life without ever hearing those words from his own father. A mother who worries, controls, and criticizes may be carrying a fear she never learned how to calm. A grandparent who sounds harsh may have survived a world where tenderness was treated as weakness, where softness was dangerous, where love had to hide behind discipline in order to survive. This does not make the hurt disappear. It does not mean the words did not cut deeply. It does not mean we should pretend that everything is fine. But it gives us a wider field of vision. Instead of seeing only the sharp edge of someone's behavior, we begin to see the hand that has been holding that blade for many years. We begin to understand that many people do not hurt others because they are free, but because they are trapped. Trapped in old habits, trapped in fear, trapped in the only language of love they were ever taught. In family life, this kind of seeing can change everything. Not because it magically changes the other person, but because it changes the place from which we respond. When we look only at the surface, we may ask, why are they like this? Why do they always have to speak this way? Why can't they understand me? Why can't they just be kind? These questions are human. They come from real exhaustion. They come from the ache of wanting to be seen by the people closest to us. But if we stay only there, our heart becomes tight. We begin to take every tone, every silence, every criticism as a direct statement about our worth. We begin to carry their confusion as if it were our identity. Their anger becomes proof that we are not enough. Their distance becomes proof that we are not lovable. Their disappointment becomes a mirror. We cannot escape. The practice begins when we gently ask a different question. Not to excuse them, not to erase ourselves, but to open the mind. We ask, what pain might be speaking through this person? What fear is hiding under this control? What loneliness is behind this coldness? What history is behind this anger? What wound is still trying to protect itself? This is not an easy question to ask when we are hurt. It requires a pause. It requires us to step back from the heat of the moment and remember that behavior is often the final sound of a long chain of causes. In Buddhist understanding, no one appears out of nowhere. No action is born alone. Every word, every reaction, every habit arises from causes and conditions. A person's upbringing, the culture they lived in, the fears they inherited, the pressure they carried, the losses they never grieved, the tenderness they never received, the ignorance they were never taught to question. A difficult parent may not simply be difficult. They may be someone who grew up in scarcity, where survival mattered more than emotional openness. They may have learned that love means providing, controlling, correcting, pushing, warning, sacrificing, but never listening. They may have been praised for endurance and punished for vulnerability. So when their child comes to them with feelings, they do not know how to meet that child with presence. They become impatient. They give advice too quickly. They minimize pain. They compare. They correct. Not always because they do not care, but because care for them has never learned the language of gentleness. A harsh grandparent may have lived through war, hunger, displacement, poverty, or a household where affection was rare. They may have seen softness taken advantage of. They may have learned to survive by becoming hard. And after many years, hardness becomes a face, a voice, a way of standing in the world. They may criticize the young not because they truly hate them, but because they are afraid the young will suffer if they are not tough enough. Their love may be wrapped in fear. Their advice may sound like judgment. Their concern may arrive like a command. A distant child may not be selfish or ungrateful in the way the family imagines. They may be protecting a fragile heart. They may have learned that being open in the family leads to being misunderstood, corrected, or shamed. So they withdraw, they answer briefly, they stay in their room, they avoid long conversations. And those who love them may feel rejected, not realizing that distance can sometimes be a form of self-protection. Behind silence, there may be overwhelm. Behind indifference, there may be sadness. Behind rebellion, there may be a desperate wish to be recognized as a separate human being. Consider as well the son or daughter who becomes the caregiver of an aging or ailing parent. At first, the role feels manageable. A few extra phone calls, a ride to the doctor, a hand offered while crossing an icy driveway. But illness rarely stays small. Medication schedules multiply, nights are interrupted. A parent who once made every decision now cannot remember what day it is, or grows frightened and lashes out at the very child trying to help them stand. The caregiver may feel a strange, forbidden mixture of love and exhaustion, tenderness and resentment, grief for a parent who is still alive, but somehow already becoming someone else. They may snap at a sibling who visits once a month and offers advice from a place of comfort the caregiver no longer has. They may cry in a parked car outside the pharmacy, not because of any single moment, but because of the accumulated weight of 100 small moments no one else witnessed. This exhaustion is not a failure of love. It is what love costs when it is carried for a long time without rest. Mindfulness does not ask the caregiver to feel grateful every hour. It asks them to notice the body when it is depleted, to ask for help without shame, to grieve the parent who is slowly disappearing, even while still tending to the body that remains. And when we begin to see this, compassion is born. Not sentimental compassion, not weak compassion, not the kind that says, "It is okay for you to hurt me because you have suffered." True compassion does not make us blind. It makes us clearer. It allows us to see both truths at the same time. This person is suffering, and their behavior may still be harmful. This person has wounds, and I still have the right to protect my peace. This person acts from causes and conditions, and I do not have to become the place where all their pain is released. This distinction is very important. Understanding is not the same as allowing. Compassion is not permission for abuse. To see someone suffering does not mean we must stay in situations that destroy us. It does not mean we must answer every call, absorb every insult, accept every manipulation, or keep returning to the same wound, hoping that our patience alone will heal it. The Buddha's path is not a path of becoming a doormat. It is a path of wisdom and love together. Love without wisdom can become self-abandonment. Wisdom without love can become coldness. But when compassion and clarity walk together, we learn how to respond in a way that protects life including our own. We can say, "I understand that you are afraid, but I cannot continue this conversation while you are shouting." We can say, "I know you have suffered, but I will not accept being insulted." We can say, "I care about you, and I need space right now." These words may be firm, but they do not have to carry hatred. Boundaries can be an expression of compassion because they prevent resentment from growing into poison. When we see the hidden suffering behind difficult behavior, we also stop taking everything so personally. This does not mean we become numb. It means we understand that many reactions are not truly about us. A parent's constant criticism may be less about our failure and more about their anxiety. A sibling's jealousy may be less about our worth and more about their insecurity. A relative's need to dominate may be less about our weakness and more about their fear of feeling powerless. When we understand this, the arrow still may touch us, but it does not have to enter as deeply. We do not have to build our identity around someone else's unhealed places. There is a quiet freedom in realizing this is their suffering speaking. I do not need to become it. We can listen with more space. We can respond with more steadiness. We can choose when to speak and when to remain silent. We can decide what is ours to carry and what must be returned to the other person with compassion. In the family, this is a profound practice because the people closest to us often know exactly where our old wounds are. Their tone can awaken the child in us. Their disappointment can awaken old shame. Their silence can awaken abandonment. Their anger can awaken fear. And in that moment, practice is not found in a temple far away. It is found in the kitchen, in the living room, in the doorway, in the car, in the small pause before we answer. Practice is remembering. I am not only reacting to this person now, I am also reacting to every memory this moment touches. Practice is breathing before we become the voice of our own pain. Practice is seeing the other person not as a fixed enemy, but as a being shaped by many storms. This does not mean we must force ourselves to feel warm toward everyone immediately. Sometimes compassion begins very small. It may begin as a single thought. They must be suffering to speak this way. Or, this behavior is painful, but it did not begin with me. Or, I can protect myself without wishing them harm. That small shift is already a doorway. It gives the heart a little room. It softens the prison of blame. It allows wisdom to enter in Buddhist practice. To see causes and conditions is to loosen the grip of judgment. We understand that if we had been born into the same body, the same family, the same fear, the same ignorance, the same unhealed history, we might also have struggled in similar ways. This reflection does not erase responsibility. Each person still must learn, grow, and face the consequences of their actions. But it helps us stop creating a solid image of someone as only bad, only selfish, only cold, only impossible. Human beings are rarely only one thing. The same person who wounded us may also be carrying love they do not know how to express. The same person who seems controlling may be terrified of losing what they love. The same person who seems distant may be longing for connection but afraid of being hurt. To see this complexity is not to confuse ourselves. It is to become more honest. Life is rarely as simple as the angry mind wants it to be. The angry mind wants a clean story. I am right, they are wrong, I am hurt, they are cruel, I am the victim, they are the problem. Sometimes there is truth in that story, but often it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is wider, and because it is wider, it can hold more compassion. When compassion deepens, our response becomes less automatic. We no longer need to win every argument. We no longer need to correct every misunderstanding immediately. We no longer need to prove our goodness to someone who is speaking from their own fear. We learn to choose our energy. We learn that some conversation require timing. Some truths must be spoken gently. Some situations require distance. Some relationships can heal only when both people are willing. And some people may never give us the understanding we hoped for, not because we are unworthy, but because they do not yet have the capacity. This realization can bring grief, because seeing someone suffering also means seeing their limitation. We may finally understand that the apology we waited for may never come in the form we imagined. The affection we needed may never arrive in the language we understand. The parent, sibling, child, or partner may love us in a way that is incomplete, clumsy, wounded, or mixed with fear, and we may need to mourn that. Compassion does not mean we pretend we were fully nourished. It means we stop demanding fruit from a tree that has never learned how to blossom. While still allowing ourselves to seek nourishment elsewhere, there is great tenderness in this. We begin to care for the part of us that kept waiting at the door of someone else's heart. We begin to say to ourselves, "I see what you needed. I see what you did not receive. I will not abandon you while trying to understand them." This is essential. Compassion for others must include compassion for ourselves. If understanding another person's suffering causes us to deny our own, then it is not true understanding, it is imbalance. The heart must be wide enough to hold both, their wound and our wound, their humanity and our dignity. As we practice this deeper seeing, family life becomes less like a battlefield and more like a mirror, not always a comfortable mirror, but a sacred one. We see where we still react from old pain. We see where we confuse love with control. We see where we expect others to be healed before we offer them patience. We see where we give too much and then grow bitter. We see where we protect ourselves with anger because we do not yet trust our own boundaries. And slowly, with many imperfect attempts, our way of being changes. We become less interested in blaming and more interested in understanding, less interested in punishing and more interested in protecting what is wholesome, less interested in being right and more interested in being free. This freedom does not mean the family becomes perfect. It means our heart is no longer completely controlled by the family's imperfections. We can sit across from someone who is difficult and remember, there is suffering here. We can feel our own pain and remember, there is suffering in me too. We can choose words that do not add more fire. We can step away when the fire is too strong. We can offer kindness without surrendering our center. We can set limits without closing the heart entirely. This is a mature form of love. It is not dramatic. It is not always visible, but it is deeply transformative. To see suffering behind behavior is to look at our family with the eyes of the Dharma. It is to understand that every person is carrying causes we may never fully know. Every sharp word has a history. Every silence has a shadow. Every difficult pattern was once perhaps someone's way of surviving. And when we see this, our heart does not become weaker, it becomes wiser. Softer, yes, but also stronger, more open, but less easily invaded. From this deeper seeing, we can begin to understand one of the most delicate practices in family life, loving someone without being swallowed by their pain. Sometimes, in the name of love, we let ourselves disappear. We say yes when our whole body is quietly saying no. We smile when something inside us is breaking. We remain silent, not because the silence is peaceful, but because we are afraid that speaking honestly will create more conflict. We tell ourselves, this is compassion. This is patience. This is what a good son does. This is what a good daughter does. This is what a loving parent, partner, brother or sister should do. But deep inside, resentment begins to gather. It does not always appear loudly. It may begin as tiredness, a heaviness in the chest, a reluctance to answer the phone, a feeling of being trapped whenever a certain person enters the room. We still love them, but we no longer feel free around them. We still care, but the caring has become mixed with bitterness. We still want harmony, but the harmony we are protecting is no longer true. Many people confuse compassion with endless tolerance. They believe that if they are truly spiritual, they should never say no. They should never feel hurt. They should never need space. They should always understand, always forgive, always carry the emotional burden of the family without complaint. But the Buddha's path is not a path of self-erasure. Loving kindness is not the same as allowing harm to continue. Compassion is not the same as becoming a place where other people can throw their anger without consequence. Patience does not mean standing in the fire and pretending not to burn. True compassion includes wisdom, and wisdom knows that the heart also needs protection. If our kindness does not include ourselves, it is incomplete. If we are gentle to everyone else but cruel to our own heart, that is not the middle way. If we abandon our dignity in the name of keeping peace, the peace becomes shallow. It becomes a thin cover over an unhealed wound, and sooner or later what is buried will find a way to speak. It may come out as anger. It may come out as withdrawal. It may come out as coldness, sarcasm, or quiet revenge. We may become the very thing we were trying so hard not to be. This is why we must learn to look carefully. Sometimes what we call compassion is actually fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being called selfish, fear of being seen as ungrateful, fear of disappointing the family image. But spiritual practice asks for honesty, not harsh honesty, not blaming honesty, but the kind of honesty that allows healing to begin. To love someone does not mean we must accept every behavior. To honor our parents does not mean we must agree with every word they say. To care for our children does not mean we must give them everything they demand. To keep connection with siblings or relatives does not mean we must participate in every family drama. There is a kind of love that says, I see your pain, but I will not allow your pain to become my prison. This is not rejection, this is clarity. A healthy boundary is not a wall built from hatred. It is a door with mindfulness. It can open, it can close. It can allow closeness when there is respect, and it can create distance when closeness becomes harmful. A boundary does not say, you are not worthy of love. It says, for love to remain alive between us, certain conditions must be protected. Respect is a condition. Safety is a condition. Honest speech is a condition. The ability to breathe in one another's presence is a condition. Without these conditions, family love becomes a place of constant injury. People keep returning to the same conversations, the same accusations, the same emotional storms, hoping that this time, somehow things will be different. But without awareness, repetition does not become healing. It becomes habit. And habit, left unexamined, becomes suffering passed from one generation to another. So we practice boundaries not to punish, but to interrupt suffering. When a conversation becomes abusive, a mindful boundary may sound like, I want to continue speaking with you, but not while we are insulting each other. I will step away now and we can talk later when we are calmer. This is not weakness. It takes great strength to leave a fire without throwing more wood into it. When a family member begins to gossip, to speak cruelly about someone who is not there, a mindful boundary may sound like, I don't feel comfortable talking about them this way. If there is something that needs to be addressed, maybe it should be spoken directly and kindly. This may feel uncomfortable at first. The room may become quiet. Someone may laugh at you or say you are being too serious. But every time you refuse to feed unkindness, you are protecting the atmosphere of the family. You are practicing right speech, not as an idea, but as a living choice. When someone raises their voice again and again, believing that volume gives them power, a mindful boundary may sound like, I can hear you better when the tone is calmer. I want to understand you, but I cannot stay present if I am being shouted. This is not demanding perfection. It is inviting respect. And sometimes when closeness repeatedly becomes harmful, the boundary may not be a sentence. It may be distance, less frequent visits, shorter phone calls. Choosing not to enter certain discussions, choosing not to share vulnerable parts of your life with someone who repeatedly uses them against you. Distance, when chosen with awareness, can be an act of compassion. It prevents the relationship from becoming more damaged than it already is. Some people will misunderstand this. They will say, "If you really loved me, you would tolerate me." But love is not proven by how much harm we can endure. Love is shown by how sincerely we protect what is wholesome in ourselves and in the relationship. If a child is spoiled in the name of love, that child is not truly loved. If a parent is allowed to control everyone through fear, that parent is not truly helped. If a family member is never invited to see the impact of their behavior, then everyone participates in keeping them unconscious. Compassion does not mean supporting someone's ignorance. Sometimes compassion means becoming a mirror that is kind enough to be clear. This is especially important for parents. A good parent is not someone who always satisfies the child. A good parent is someone who helps the child develop the inner strength to meet life. If a child is always given what they want, they may never learn how to sit with disappointment. If every discomfort is removed, they may never discover patience. If every mistake is fixed by someone else, they may never develop responsibility. To love a child is to guide them toward mindfulness, compassion, and self-reliance. It is to teach them, gently but firmly, that their feelings matter, but their feelings do not have to rule the whole house. Their desires are natural, but not every desire needs to be obeyed. Their pain deserves care, but they also have the capacity to breathe, to learn, to try again. This is not coldness, this is deep love. In the same way, to love our parents as adults does not mean we must remain children before them forever. We can respect their sacrifices and still have our own path. We can listen to their worries and still make our own decisions. We can understand their conditioning and still say, "I cannot live only to satisfy your fear." Many families suffer because love is mixed with control. Parents control children because they are afraid. Children rebel because they feel unseen. Partners demand because they feel insecure. Siblings compete because old wounds were never acknowledged. Everyone is asking to be loved, but often the asking comes out as pressure, criticism, or manipulation. If we are not mindful, we respond to pressure with pressure. We respond to control with control. We try to force others to change so that we can finally feel peaceful. But this is not self-reliance. Self-reliance, in the Dharma sense, does not mean we do not need anyone. It means we stop placing the key to our peace entirely in someone else's pocket. It means we learn to care for our own mind, even when others are not yet wise. It means we do not wait for every family member to become kind, calm, and understanding before we allow ourselves to breathe. This is a profound turning point. We may have spent years thinking, "When my mother stops criticizing me, I will be happy. When my father finally understands me, I will be free. When my partner changes, I will be peaceful. When my family apologizes, I can begin again." Of course, we may still long for these things. It is human to want understanding. It is human to want apology, tenderness, and recognition. But if our peace depends completely on whether others awaken, then our heart remains in chains. The practice is to bring the mind home. We can say, "This person may never speak the way I wish they would speak, but I can learn how to meet their words without losing myself." We can say, "This family may never become ideal, but I can still cultivate clarity, kindness, and dignity within it." We can say, "I cannot control their karma, but I can take care of my own." This is not resignation. It is freedom beginning to take root. When we set a boundary, the first person who must respect it is ourselves. If we say we will not stay in abusive conversations, but we remain every time, our own mind loses trust in us. If we say we need rest, but we keep sacrificing our body to avoid disappointing others, our body begins to feel abandoned. If we say we want honesty, but we keep pretending, the heart becomes confused. So the practice of boundaries is also the practice of keeping a compassionate promise to oneself. At first, this may bring guilt. Especially in family, guilt can be very strong. We may hear old voices inside. You are selfish, you are ungrateful, you are difficult, you are destroying the family. But we must ask gently, is this guilt coming from wisdom or from old conditioning? There is a difference between remorse and guilt. Remorse arises when we have truly caused harm, and it guides us to repair. Guilt often arises when we begin to leave an unhealthy role. Remorse opens the heart. Guilt traps it. Remorse says, please look carefully and make amends. Guilt says, return to the old pattern, even if it hurts you. Mindfulness helps us know the difference. We can sit quietly and feel the body. We can ask, what is happening in me right now? Am I closing my heart? Am I acting from anger? Am I trying to punish? Or am I protecting something sacred and necessary? A boundary offered with hatred feels tight, burning, aggressive. A boundary offered with compassion may still feel firm, but there is space inside it. There is sadness, perhaps, but not cruelty. There is strength, but not the wish to destroy. This is the balance we are learning. We do not want to become hard, but we also do not want to remain helpless. We do not want to reject our family, but we also do not want to abandon ourselves. We do not want to live in resentment, but we also do not want to call resentment love, just because we are afraid to speak. The path of loving kindness is not sentimental, it is courageous. It asks us to keep the heart open without letting the mind become confused. It asks us to understand suffering without becoming a servant to it. It asks us to forgive, but not to deny. To stay connected when connection is wholesome. To step back when stepping back protects life. In family, this practice can be very subtle. A boundary may be as simple as pausing before answering a provocative question. It may be choosing not to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. It may be saying, I need a moment, and going outside to breathe. It may be ending a phone call with kindness before it turns into another wound. It may be deciding that not every invitation must be accepted. Not every criticism must be answered. Not every emotional storm must become your home. These are small acts, but they change the direction of a life. Because each time we protect the conditions for mindfulness, we make it more possible for love to become clean again. Not perfect, not always easy, but cleaner, less mixed with fear, less polluted by obligation, less dependent on silent suffering. And strangely, when we stop losing ourselves in the name of compassion, our compassion often becomes more genuine. We can give without secretly demanding repayment. We can listen without drowning. We can help without becoming bitter. We can say no without hatred, and yes without resentment. This is a love that can last, with boundaries in place. Family life becomes less about controlling one another, and more about practicing small daily acts of presence. We begin to see that peace is not created by everyone obeying our wishes. Peace is created, moment by moment, when we return to awareness, speak with care, protect what is wholesome, and remember that the heart can be both tender and strong. And when this understanding begins to enter the home, something very ordinary becomes sacred, not sacred in a dramatic way, not with incense always burning, not with silence filling every room, not with everyone speaking gently all the time. The sacredness of family life is often hidden inside the most common sounds. A door closing a little too loudly, dishes left in the sink, a child calling your name again and again, a parent sighing from the next room, a phone ringing in the middle of dinner, someone asking, "Where is my shirt?" Someone forgetting to turn off the light, someone coming home tired, carrying the whole day on their face. If we are not mindful, these sounds become interruptions. They feel like disturbances to the life we think we should be living. We imagine that peace would come if the house were quieter, if people were more considerate, if everyone understood what we needed without being told. But if we look deeply, these ordinary sounds are not merely interruptions. They are bells of practice. In a monastery, the bell is struck to remind the practitioners to return to the present moment. When the bell sounds, people stop, breathe, and remember. But in a family, the bell may not be made of bronze. It may be the sound of a spoon falling to the floor. It may be your child crying just when you finally sat down. It may be your partner speaking in a tone that touches an old wound. It may be your mother asking the same question for the third time. It may be your father's silence at the dinner table. It may be the laundry waiting, the dog barking, the rice boiling over, the message you did not want to receive. The home is a meditation hall, but not the kind that allows us to escape life. It is the kind that invites us to meet life directly. This is why family life can be such a deep path. It does not give us much space to pretend that we are peaceful. It shows us very quickly where our patience ends. It shows us how easily love becomes demand. It shows us how a small disappointment can turn into accusation, how a tired body can create a sharp tongue, how an old memory can hide inside a present conversation. In the home, our practice is not theoretical. It is immediate. It has a face. It has a voice. It is standing in front of us asking for attention. Many people think meditation means sitting still with closed eyes, breathing in a quiet room. And yes, that is a beautiful and necessary practice. Sitting meditation helps us become familiar with our own mind. It teaches us how to pause, how to listen, how to be with what is happening inside without running away. But if meditation remains only on the cushion, it is not yet complete. The real test of mindfulness is not whether we can be calm when no one is disturbing us. The real test is whether we can return to awareness in the middle of noise, requests, misunderstanding, and fatigue. Can we breathe when we are blamed unfairly? Can we soften when someone we love speaks harshly? Can we notice irritation before it becomes speech? Can we wash a dish without turning it into a story of being unappreciated? Can we prepare food not as a burden, but as a quiet offering? Can we listen for 1 full minute without planning our defense? This is meditation in action. Washing dishes can be resentment or it can be practice. The hands are in warm water. The plate is in front of us. The breath is moving in and out. But the mind may be somewhere else saying, why am I always the one doing this? No one ever helps. No one sees how tired I am. Sometimes those thoughts are pointing to a real imbalance that needs to be addressed with honesty. Mindfulness does not ask us to deny reality, but it does ask us to see clearly before we act. If resentment is there, we can know resentment is here. If fatigue is there, we can know fatigue is here. If the need for support is there, we can know I need support. Then the dish in our hand becomes more than a dish. It becomes a mirror, and from that mirror, we may choose a better response. Not swallowing everything, not exploding. Perhaps after the dishes are done, we speak calmly and say, I feel tired. I need us to share this more. That is practice, not the absence of discomfort, but the transformation of discomfort into clarity. Preparing food is also practice. To cook with care is not only to feed the body of the family, but to touch the intention behind the action. Even a simple meal can carry tenderness. Cutting vegetables, stirring soup, setting the table, pouring water into a glass. These can become gestures of presence. We may not always feel joyful doing them. Some days the body is exhausted, the mind is crowded, the heart is heavy. But even then, we can pause and remember, may this food support life. May those who eat it be nourished. May I not lose myself in irritation while doing what is needed. In this way, ordinary tasks become quiet teachings. Folding clothes teaches patience. Sweeping the floor teaches humility. Taking out the trash teaches non-attachment. Waiting for someone who is late teaches us how the mind creates suffering before anything has even happened. Caring for a sick family member teaches tenderness, but also the need for boundaries. Listening to an elderly parent repeat a story teaches us that love sometimes means receiving the same moment again with a fresh heart. Even entering a room can be practice. We often enter rooms carrying our mood like weather. If we are angry, we bring a storm. If we are anxious, we bring trembling air. If we are distracted, we bring absence. But mindfulness invites us to pause at the threshold, just one breath, before opening the door, before speaking, before bringing the burden of the day into the shared space. We can ask, what am I bringing into this room? Not to shame ourselves, but to become responsible for our energy. A home changes through such small moments: a softer footstep, a gentler greeting, a hand placed on a shoulder without needing words, a moment of silence before answering a difficult question. These things may seem too small to matter, but the atmosphere of a family is made of small things repeated many times. Harshness repeated becomes fear. Neglect repeated becomes loneliness. But kindness repeated becomes trust. Presence repeated becomes safety. One of the simplest and most powerful practices in family life is the conscious breath before responding. Just one breath. It sounds almost too simple. But between what is said and what we say next, there is a doorway. Most of our suffering in relationships happens because we rush through that doorway without awareness. Someone criticizes us, and we immediately defend. Someone disappoints us, and we immediately accuse. Someone expresses pain, and we immediately explain why they should not feel that way. The moment is small, but the consequences can last for days, sometimes years. One breath can interrupt the chain. Breathing in, we feel the heat in the body. Breathing out, we relax the jaw. Breathing in, we know, I am triggered. Breathing out, we remember, this person is not only this sentence. This person is also suffering, learning, carrying their own history. This does not mean we agree with everything. It does not mean we let harmful words pass without response. It simply means we respond from a deeper place than reactivity. The family meditation hall does not require that everyone becomes spiritual. It does not require that every member agrees to practice. Sometimes you may be the only one trying to be mindful. Sometimes no one else will understand why you are pausing, why you are speaking more slowly, why you no longer want to win every argument. This can feel lonely at first, but practice is not a performance. You are not practicing to prove that you are better. You are practicing because you want freedom from your own automatic suffering. You are practicing because you want love to become less violent, less possessive, less confused. A rhythm of family mindfulness can be very simple. In the morning, before the day becomes busy, place one intention in the heart, not a complicated vow, just something living and reachable. Today, may I speak with more care. Today may I listen before reacting. Today may I remember that my child is not my enemy. Today may I not treat my parents as obstacles. Today may I return to my breath when irritation appears. This morning intention is like lighting a small lamp before walking into the day. Then somewhere in the day, let there be at least one mindful meal. It may not be quiet. It may not be perfect. The children may still move around. Someone may still be distracted, but for a few moments the family can touch gratitude. Before eating, take one breath and look at the food. Remember the hands that made it possible. The farmer, the rain, the soil, the person who cooked, the money earned, the time given, the life of plants and animals. Even if no one says anything aloud, you can silently recognize, this meal is a gift. May I not eat it while lost in anger or worry. During the day, practice one conscious breath before responding, especially in moments of tension. This is not easy. Sometimes you will forget. Sometimes the words will fly out before awareness arrives. But even then, the practice is not lost. The moment you realize, I spoke too harshly, mindfulness has returned. That moment, Matty, I'm sorry. I was tired and I spoke in a way that hurt you. Such a sentence may seem simple, but in many families it is revolutionary. It breaks the inheritance of pride. It teaches children that strength includes humility. It teaches adults that love does not require pretending to be faultless. In the evening, take a few minutes for reflection, not to judge the whole day as success or failure, but to look gently. Where did I lose myself today? Where did I return? What touched my anger? What helped my heart soften? Did I listen to someone fully? Did I ignore someone who needed me? Did I take responsibility for my mood, or did I throw it onto the people around me? This kind of reflection is not self-punishment. It is cleaning the mirror of the heart. And before sleep, remember one small kindness. One kindness received or one kindness given. Perhaps someone made tea. Perhaps a child smiled. Perhaps a partner moved your shoes aside so you would not trip. Perhaps you restrained a harsh sentence. Perhaps you answered a message with patience. Perhaps you allowed someone to rest. The mind has a habit of collecting what went wrong. Gratitude trains it to also recognize what is still beautiful. Progress in this practice should not be measured by never being triggered. If that is the measure, we will always feel like failures. Family touches the deepest places in us. Of course we will be triggered. Of course old wounds will rise. Of course fatigue will weaken our patience. The measure of practice is not whether the storm appears. The measure is how soon we remember the sky. Do we return sooner? Do we repair faster? Do we blame less? Do we listen with a little more space? Do we love with more steadiness, even when we do not get our way? A person who practices deeply is not someone who never makes mistakes. It is someone who becomes more honest about their mistakes, more willing to repair, more careful with the next word. In family life, this matters more than any image of perfection. Children do not need perfect parents. They need parents who can wake up. Parents do not need perfect children. They need the courage to guide without crushing, to love without controlling, to apologize when they have forgotten tenderness. And each person in the home, whether young or old, becomes part of this field of practice. The child who tests your patience is teaching you where patience is still conditional. The parent who does not understand your choices is teaching you how to stand with respect and firmness. The partner who disappoints you is teaching you to speak truth without poisoning the bond. The sibling who irritates you is teaching you how strong the ego can be. When it wants to be right, no one is merely an obstacle. Everyone is, in some way, a bell. This does not mean we romanticize suffering. It does not mean we stay in harmful situations and call it practice. Wisdom is always needed. But in the ordinary difficulties of family life, there is a path. A path made not of grand spiritual experiences, but of returning again and again to the moment in front of us, the cup to be washed, the face to be seen, the tone to be softened, the silence to be respected, the apology to be offered, the boundary to be held, the gratitude to be remembered. The home becomes a meditation hall when we stop waiting for perfect conditions to practice. The practice is here, in the hallway, in the kitchen, beside the bed, at the dining table, near the pile of shoes by the door. It is here when we are rested, and here when we are tired. Here when love feels easy, and here when love feels like work. Here when the house is peaceful, and here when everything feels too loud. If we can bring awareness into these moments, then nothing in family life is wasted. Even conflict can teach. Even disappointment can open the heart. Even the days we fail can become part of the path. If we return with humility, and slowly, the home begins to breathe differently. Not because everyone has become calm forever, but because someone is learning to pause. Someone is choosing not to pass pain forward. Someone is washing the dish with less bitterness. Someone is listening 1 minute longer. Someone is saying sorry sooner. Someone is remembering that beneath the roles of mother, father, child, partner, brother, sister, there are human beings wanting to be safe, wanting to be seen, wanting to love and be loved without fear. As this practice deepens, the family begins to change, not always dramatically, not always quickly, but through small moments that soften the atmosphere of the home. Sometimes the atmosphere of a home is older than the people living in it. A father raises his voice, and if we listen deeply, we may hear not only his anger, but the echo of another voice that once frightened him when he was small. A mother stays silent when she is hurt, and beneath that silence may be the habit of generations of women who were never taught that their feelings had a place at the table. A child learns to hide mistakes, not because the child was born dishonest, but because somewhere in the family line, fear became stronger than trust. Families pass down many beautiful things. They pass down names, stories, songs, recipes, the way soup is seasoned, the way holidays are celebrated, the way hands are folded in prayer, the way an elder's photograph is placed on a shelf. We inherit laughter, courage, endurance, humor, and small rituals of care. But families also pass down emotional habits. They pass down the way people handle pain, or refuse to handle it. They pass down silence. They pass down shame. They pass down control that is mistaken for love. They pass down sacrifice without communication, loyalty without tenderness, duty without warmth. And because these things are repeated inside ordinary life, they often do not look like patterns. They look like personality. They look like culture. They look like this is just how our family is. One person always explodes. One person always withdraws. One person always blames. One person always carries everything and then feels resentful. One person always becomes the peacekeeper, smiling on the outside while slowly becoming exhausted within. But mindfulness allows us to see what has been living through us. This is a powerful moment in family practice. The moment we recognize, this reaction is not only mine, this fear has a history. This anger has been traveling for a long time. This silence did not begin with me. In that moment, something begins to loosen. The pattern is still there, but it is no longer completely invisible. And what is no longer invisible is no longer completely in control. Awareness is the beginning of freedom, not sudden freedom, not perfect freedom, but the first small space in which a different choice becomes possible. Perhaps you hear yourself speaking to your child in the exact tone that once hurt you. The words leave your mouth, and suddenly your heart feels a painful recognition. In the past, you may have continued, defending yourself, saying, "I am the parent, I have the right." But now, because awareness is present, you stop. You take a breath, you feel the heat in your face, the tightness in your chest, the fear underneath the anger. And maybe for the first time you say, "I was upset, but I should not have spoken to you that way." That apology may seem small, but in the deep river of a family line, it is not small. It is a turning. It is a doorway opening where for generations there may have only been walls. To heal generational patterns does not mean we must blame our parents or condemn our ancestors. Blame can sometimes feel powerful, but it rarely brings true liberation. The deeper practice is understanding, not excusing harm, not pretending pain was acceptable, but understanding how pain moves when no one has been taught to transform it. Many people gave pain because pain was what they had received. They learned harshness from harshness. They learned fear from fear. They learned emotional distance from homes where tenderness was considered weakness. They learned to survive, but not always to love gently. They may have worked hard, fed children, endured poverty, protected the family name, carried burdens no one saw, and yet still did not know how to say, "I am proud of you," or "I am afraid," or "I love you" without conditions. When we see this, the heart becomes more spacious. We do not have to deny our wounds. We do not have to force ourselves to feel grateful for what harmed us. But we can begin to hold a wider truth. Our parents were children once. Our grandparents were children once. Somewhere, each person in the family line began life with an open heart. Then life touched them. War touched them. Hunger touched them. Loss touched them. Humiliation touched them. Violence, abandonment, disappointment, and loneliness touched them. And because no one showed them how to sit with suffering mindfully, they passed it forward in the only language they knew. This understanding does not erase responsibility. In fact, It makes responsibility more sacred. We begin to see that if we do not bring awareness to our own pain, we may hand it to someone else. If we do not touch our anger with compassion, our anger may become a child's fear. If we do not learn to speak honestly, our silence may become another person's confusion. If we do not heal our need to control, we may call it care while making others feel trapped. Mindfulness interrupts the chain. It may begin in very simple moments. A parent notices the impulse to shame a child for failing and chooses instead to ask, "What happened? How can we learn from this?" An adult child, after years of resentment, speaks honestly to a parent, not with cruelty, not with the intention to punish, but with the wish to be real. "When that happened, I was hurt. I don't want to keep pretending it was nothing." Siblings who have competed for love since childhood begin to see that the rivalry was planted long ago by comparison, scarcity, and the fear of being less valued. Instead of repeating the old competition, one of them says, "I don't want us to keep hurting each other in this way." These moments are not always dramatic. Often, healing enters the family quietly. A husband who used to leave the room whenever conflict appeared learns to stay and listen. A wife who used to carry every responsibility in silence learns to say, "I need help," before resentment hardens. A grandmother who once believed children should never speak back begins to listen when a grandchild says, "I feel sad." A son who once hid every struggle begins to admit, "I am not okay today." A daughter who always tried to be perfect begins to allow herself to be human. The old family pattern says, "Do not talk about feelings." Awareness says, "A feeling named with kindness loses some of its poison." The old family pattern says, "Love means control." Awareness says, "Love can guide without imprisoning." The old family pattern says, "Never apologize to children." Awareness says, "Respect grows when humility is present." The old family pattern says, "If you are hurt, become hard." Awareness says, "If I am hurt, I can become honest, tender, and wise." This is not easy work. Anyone who has tried to change a family pattern knows how strong the old current can be. You may decide to speak calmly, and someone may accuse you of being cold. You may set a boundary, and someone may call you selfish. You may stop joining in gossip, and others may think you are judging them. You may apologize, and the other person may not know how to receive it. You may tell the truth gently, and still, someone may feel attacked because the family is used to hiding. This is why the practice must be rooted in patience. We are not only changing a behavior, we are touching a structure that may have been built over many decades. When one person changes their step, the whole dance feels different. Others may resist, not because your healing is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. The family system often prefers the known pain to the unknown freedom. So we practice without arrogance. We do not say, "I am the awakened one, and all of you are unconscious." That attitude only creates another form of separation. Instead, we practice like a quiet lamp in the room. A lamp does not force anyone to see, it simply shines. It offers another possibility. It reveals the chair, the doorway, the face of the person sitting nearby. It does not argue with the darkness. It does not hate the darkness. It just continues to give light. One mindful person in a household can become such a lamp, not by preaching all the time, not by correcting everyone's emotions, not by using spiritual language to feel superior, but by embodying another way of being, by pausing before reacting, by saying, "Let me think about this before I answer," by noticing when the voice becomes sharp, by coming back after conflict and repairing what can be repaired, by refusing to humiliate others even when angry, by listening with the whole body, by remembering that every person in the house is carrying visible and invisible burdens. This kind of presence can slowly change the emotional weather of a home. At first, it may seem that nothing is changing. The same complaints arise, the same misunderstandings return, the same wounds are touched again and again. But do not underestimate the power of one different response repeated with sincerity. A child who receives an apology learns that love can be humble. A parent who is heard without being attacked may slowly become less defensive. A sibling who is no longer met with contention begins to relax. A family that learns to name sadness, fear, loneliness, disappointment, and need may no longer have to express everything through anger. To heal a generational pattern is to become a place where the old suffering can arrive and not be sent onward unchanged. This may be one of the deepest forms of compassion, not the kind that appears soft on the surface, but the kind that requires strength. It takes strength to feel anger and not let it become violence. It takes strength to feel hurt and not turn it into revenge. It takes strength to remember your childhood pain and still choose to parent with tenderness. It takes strength to speak truth without cruelty. It takes strength to step out of a pattern that once gave you a sense of identity. Sometimes we may fail. We may repeat the very thing we promised ourselves we would never repeat. We may shout. We may withdraw. We may shame someone. We may become cold. And when that happens, the practice is not to drown in guilt. Guilt that becomes self-hatred does not heal the family. The practice is to wake up again, to bow inwardly to the truth of what happened, to repair where repair is possible, to learn more deeply the conditions that led us there. We can say, I see that I was overwhelmed. We can say, I touched an old wound and reacted from it. We can say, I want to try again. This is how the path continues, not through perfection but through returning. In Buddhist practice, awareness is not merely thinking about something. It is seeing clearly with the whole heart. When we bring awareness to our family patterns, we begin to see causes and conditions. We see that no one becomes angry, controlling, distant, or fearful out of nowhere. We see the soil in which these habits grew, and when we see the soil, we can begin to plant something different. Instead of planting fear, we plant safety. Instead of planting shame, we plant dignity. Instead of planting silence, we plant truthful speech. Instead of planting control, we plant trust. Instead of planting emotional hunger, we plant presence. This planting may not bear fruit immediately. Some seeds take a long time. Some may bloom in our children. Some may bloom in the way our grandchildren learn to speak. Some may bloom simply in the quiet peace of our own heart, because we know we did not live blindly. We know we took the suffering that came to us and did our best to transform it. And perhaps this is how a family line is healed. Not all at once, not by one grand conversation that solves everything forever, but by many small acts of awakened love, one breath before speaking, one honest sentence, one apology, one boundary, one moment of listening, one refusal to continue a cruelty that once felt normal, one hand placed gently on the shoulder of someone who expected judgment but received care. When we practice in this way, we honor our ancestors not by repeating all their habits, but by transforming what they could not transform. We honor our parents not by pretending they were perfect, but by understanding their humanity and choosing to continue the journey with more awareness. We honor our children not by giving them a painless life, but by giving them a more conscious love. And we honor ourselves by remembering that we are not trapped inside the past. The past may explain us, but it does not have to imprison us. The family story may have shaped us, but it does not have to speak through us forever. With mindfulness, with compassion, with courage, we can become the turning point. We can be the one who says quietly and firmly, "This pain has traveled far enough. It can stop here. It can be understood here. It can be held here. It can be transformed here." In the end, the practice returns to one simple but demanding truth. The people closest to us are not obstacles to the path. They are part of the path. And if they are part of the path, then perhaps the home is not merely a place where we return to rest. Perhaps it is also a place where the deepest parts of us are revealed, not in the quiet, beautiful way we imagine spiritual practice should happen. But in the ordinary moments, when someone speaks sharply, when someone misunderstands us, when an old wound is touched, when the person we love becomes difficult to love, this is where the practice becomes real. It is easy to speak of compassion when no one is challenging us. It is easy to speak of patience when nobody is interrupting our plans. It is easy to speak of loving kindness when we are alone, sitting quietly, protected from the habits and emotions of others. But family has a way of entering the room we tried to keep private. Family touches the places we thought were healed. Family calls forth the child inside us, the old fear, the unfinished anger, the longing to be seen, the habit of defending ourselves before we even understand what is happening. And yet, this is not a failure of practice. This is the beginning of practice. Because loving kindness is not proven by how kind we are toward people who never disturb us. Loving kindness is revealed in the moment we feel disturbed, and we pause. It is revealed when we could answer with cruelty, but choose a softer word. It is revealed when we could close our heart completely, but leave one small window open. It is revealed when we realize, this person is difficult right now, and still, they too are suffering. They too are trying to be happy in the only way they know. This does not mean we approve of harmful behavior. It does not mean we erase our own pain. It does not mean we stay silent when truth is needed, or allow others to cross the boundaries that protect our dignity. The Buddha's way is not weakness. Compassion is not the same as submission. Loving kindness does not ask us to disappear. To love wisely is to hold both tenderness and clarity. It is to say, I care about you, and I will not continue this conversation if we are hurting each other. It is to say, I understand that you are in pain, but I cannot carry your anger for you. It is to say, I want peace between us, and peace requires honesty. Sometimes loving kindness speaks gently. Sometimes loving kindness steps back. Sometimes loving kindness is an apology. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is simply breathing before we respond, so that the next words do not become another stone in the wall between two hearts. In this way, family life becomes a living meditation. Not a meditation separate from washing dishes, preparing meals, answering messages, taking care of aging parents, listening to children, paying bills, or sitting beside someone who does not know how to say thank you. It is meditation inside all of that. It is mindfulness in the kitchen, compassion in the hallway, patience at the dinner table, humility after an argument, and courage in the silence after someone has gone to their room. Every ordinary scene becomes a mirror. When someone criticizes us, we can notice the body tightening. When someone ignores our effort, we can notice the sadness rising. When someone repeats the same mistake, we can notice the mind wanting to punish. When someone we love is careless with our feelings, we can notice the old story. I am not valued, I am not safe, I am alone. And if we can see these movements clearly, even for one breath, we are no longer completely lost inside them. This is the quiet miracle of mindfulness. It does not always change the other person. It does not make every family member suddenly gentle, grateful, or emotionally mature, but it changes the way we meet the moment. It gives us a small space between pain and reaction. And in that small space, a life can change direction. Maybe yesterday we shouted. Today we notice the shouting beginning. Maybe yesterday we blamed. Today we feel the urge to blame, and we breathe. Maybe yesterday we withdrew for days. Today we take an hour, calm the heart, and return with more honesty. Maybe yesterday's demanded that someone understand us perfectly. Today we say what is true without forcing them to become who we want them to be. This is progress, not perfection. Progress. The path does not ask us to become saints in our own living room. It asks us to become more awake. It asks us to notice sooner, to soften more often, to repair more sincerely, to listen more deeply, to stop passing our pain forward as if it were an inheritance that must never end. There will still be days when we fail. There will be days when our voice becomes sharp, when our patience is thin, when we say too much or say nothing at all. There will be days when the old self returns quickly, like a familiar storm, and after such moments is not to drown in shame. Shame says, I am hopeless. Mindfulness says, I have seen suffering arise. Now I can begin again. Beginning again is one of the most compassionate skills we can learn. We begin again by taking responsibility for our part, even if it is not the whole story. We begin again by saying, I'm sorry for the way I spoke. We begin again by asking, can we talk when we are both calmer? We begin again by admitting I was hurt and I reacted from that hurt. We begin again by choosing not to turn one painful moment into a permanent identity for ourselves or for the other person, because the people in our family are not only the worst thing they have done, and we are not only the worst way we have reacted. Each person carries more than what appears on the surface. Behind a father's anger, there may be years of fear he never learned to name. Behind a mother's control, there may be a lifetime of anxiety and sacrifice. Behind a child's rebellion, there may be a cry to be understood. Behind a sibling's distance, there may be old comparison, old hurt, old loneliness. Behind our own impatience, there may be exhaustion. Behind our silence, there may be a wish not to be wounded again. When we remember this, compassion becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. To see someone compassionately is not to excuse every action. It is to look deeper than the action. It is to understand that every harsh word comes from a mind that is not at peace. Every selfish act comes from a heart that feels lacking. Every attempt to control comes from fear. Every refusal to listen comes from a person trapped in their own pain. When we see this, we may still need to protect ourselves, but we protect ourselves without hatred. We may still need to speak firmly, but we speak without wishing to destroy. This is the maturity of the heart, and perhaps this is one of the most powerful gifts a parent can offer a child. Not the gift of always pleasing them, not the gift of removing every difficulty from their path, not the gift of pretending that love means saying yes to everything. A good parent, a conscious parent, teaches a child how to live with awareness, how to feel anger without becoming cruel, how to feel sadness without collapsing, how to make mistakes and repair them, how to be kind without being weak, how to be strong without becoming cold. Children learn not only from what we say, but from the atmosphere we create around them. They learn from the way we apologize. They learn from the way we treat the elderly. They learn from the way we speak about people who are not in the room. They learn from whether we can calm ourselves before we discipline them. They learn from whether love in the home feels like a prison, a performance, or a refuge. And even if we did not receive such love perfectly, we can become students of it now. We can learn to bring presence into the family where there was once only habit. We can learn to bring listening where there was once interruption. We can learn to bring gentleness where there was once sarcasm. We can learn to bring steadiness where there was once emotional chaos. We may not transform the entire family system overnight, but every mindful breath interrupts the old momentum. Every compassionate response plants a new seed. Every act of inner responsibility becomes a quiet blessing for those who come after us. This is why the family is such a deep practice, because there is nowhere to hide for very long. The people closest to us see our habits, they feel our moods, they know our patterns, and we know theirs. The closeness can be painful, but it also makes the practice honest. We cannot pretend to be peaceful if our peace disappears the moment someone disagrees with us. We cannot pretend to be compassionate if our compassion only extends to strangers, while those at home receive our resentment. We cannot pretend to be mindful if our speech wounds the people who trust us most. But we also do not need to condemn ourselves for this. We only need to return to the breath, return to the body, Return to the present moment before the story grows too large. Return to the simple recognition. This is suffering in me, in them, between us. And then ask gently, what would love do here if love also had wisdom? Sometimes love would speak. Sometimes love would wait. Sometimes love would listen. Sometimes love would leave the room before anger becomes violence. Sometimes love would sit beside someone in silence. Sometimes love would say no. Sometimes love would say, I miss you. Sometimes love would say, I cannot continue like this. Sometimes love would say nothing, but the eyes would soften, and that softness would be enough to stop a war from beginning. This is not dramatic. It is not always visible. No one may praise us for it. No one may know how many reactions we swallowed, how many sharp words we transformed before they reached the air, how many times we chose not to repeat the pain we inherited. But the heart knows, the atmosphere knows, the future knows. A home changes not only through big declarations, but through tiny returns to awareness. One kinder response, one honest conversation, one less insult, one more apology, one moment of listening when we wanted to win, one moment of restraint when we wanted to wound, one moment of tenderness towards someone who has forgotten how to ask for tenderness. And slowly, the home becomes different, not perfect, but more breathable, more human, more awake. There may still be conflict, there may still be misunderstanding, there may still be personalities that do not easily blend, but beneath it, a new intention begins to live. We do not have to use our closeness as a weapon. We do not have to make our pain the ruler of this house. We do not have to wait for everyone else to become wise before we practice wisdom ourselves. We can begin with one breath. We can begin with the next sentence. We can begin the next time someone says something difficult, and we feel the ancient fire rise within us. In that moment, we can remember, this is the path, not somewhere else, not later, when life is easier, not when everyone finally understands us. Here in this room, here in this family, here with these imperfect people, and this imperfect heart, and this chance to choose again. Imagine for a moment a family home at night. The lights are low. The day has left its traces everywhere. Cups on the table, a chair slightly out of place, a message unanswered, a conversation unfinished. Behind different doors, each person carries their own invisible world. One is tired but does not know how to say it. One is afraid but covers it with control. One feels lonely but acts indifferent. One regrets what they said but cannot yet apologize. One lies awake, wishing things could be softer, simpler, more peaceful. No one in that house is perfect. No one has loved without mistake. No one has passed through life without being wounded. And yet, each person is still capable of becoming a little kinder tomorrow. Each person is still capable of seeing more clearly. Each person is still capable, in some small way, of turning toward peace. And perhaps that is enough for tonight. Not to solve everything, not to force harmony, not to rewrite years of pain in a single evening, but to place one hand over the heart and remember, I can return. I can speak with more care. I can see with more compassion. I can take responsibility for the energy I bring into this home. I can love without losing myself. I can be firm without becoming cruel. I can begin again. Family life, with all its friction and tenderness, can become a sacred path when we return again and again to mindful speech, compassionate seeing, and inner responsibility. If you find this useful, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment.